Chapter 268. Lang Jun, Lang Jun. You! The maids hurried forward, and Jiang Pengji drank a jar of wine in front of them. Although her eyes were still clear, her steps were a little shaky, and her figure seemed to be swaying as she walked. She looked like a typical drunkard. They didn't know if Jiang Pengji was really drunk, but they knew that if they didn't keep an eye on her, she would fall into the hot spring. If something happened to her, they would lose their lives. They couldn't let anything happen to her. Jiang Pengji avoided the obstruction of the two maids and left the hot spring. She stared straight at a waterside pavilion in front of her. As the saying goes, one can wear out iron shoes in fruitless search, but by chance one finds it without any effort. She didn't take the initiative to find the two men, but they couldn't wait to die. The two men, who were targeted by Jiang Pengji, didn't realize that they were in danger. Instead, they laughed and chatted with their companions. One of their hands restlessly touched the maid's body. Looking at the maid's embarrassed expression, but she didn't dare to resist, the fright they had during the day was greatly alleviated. If you like it, you can summon this maidservant tonight to relieve your longing. TSK. This looks decent. It's indeed the hot spring hotel under Prince Changshuo's name. The maidservants here are all beautiful. The young man who was called Brother was moved, but he couldn't show too much enthusiasm. It would make him look like a pervert. This. How can I do that? A gentleman doesn't take what others love. How dare I take away what you like? A snow-white robe was loose on his body. The belt was loose, revealing most of his chest. Because he had been pampered for years, his skin was fair and rosy. It was more delicate than a girl's. However, wine and women had taken away his body. His eyebrows were drooping, and he looked listless. Hey, you and I are still fussing about this? Women are like clothes, and brothers are like hands and feet. This is just an insignificant woman. If you like her, you can enjoy her. The young man waved his hand carelessly. Birds of a feather flocked together. The two fops' auras matched each other. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to hang out together. Since you said so then? Before he could respond, the smell of alcohol assaulted his nostrils. Although it was not pungent, it diluted the lingering body fragrance of the maid. The young man raised his head in annoyance, only to see a drunken teenager holding a wine jar blocking his way. Remember who I am? Jiang Pengji narrowed her eyes and looked down at the two young men sitting in the waterside pavilion with a faint smile. The tourists who were enjoying the cool found that the atmosphere was not right. They could not help but pay attention to this place. They either watched the show with cold eyes or were secretly curious. With the evaluation around the corner, no one wanted to be dragged into this mess. Strange, how would I know who you are? A young man smiled contemptuously. Of course, he did not recognize Jiang Pengji. He thought she was just an ordinary tourist. You don't know? Jiang Pengji squinted her eyes as if she was tipsy. Suddenly, she moved closer to one of them. You drunkard, stay away from me. This is not an ordinary hot spring hotel. Not just any lowly person can come here. The young man leaned back and politely declined the smell of alcohol on Jiang Pengji's body. His face was full of disgust. Jiang Pengji suddenly opened her mouth, revealing a mouthful of snow-white teeth. Her smile was evil and wanton. Just as the two young men were about to lose their patience and wanted to push Jiang Pengji away, a snow-white foot suddenly appeared. Ah! There was a loud splash, and the hot spring next to the waterside pavilion splashed a huge amount of water. Everyone watched helplessly as one of the young men was kicked off the waterside pavilion by the drunk teenager. His whole body flipped over and fell into the hot spring. More importantly, the kick was aimed at his face. Because of the sudden movement, the loose clothes on the young man's body immediately became unable to fall off. His belt loosened and his lapel opened, revealing his white body. The young man was still flopping in the water. He was caught off guard and choked. His entire person seemed to be in an extremely sorry state. What are you looking at? You go down too. Without waiting for the others to react, Jiang Pengji turned around and kicked the other young man into the hot spring. There was another splash, and a huge splash happened to fall on the previous young man. The two of them rolled in the hot spring. Ha ha ha, don't I look like a skinned frog? Jiang Pengji laughed wantonly. She crossed the waterside pavilion's fence and stood on the rock garden next to the waterside pavilion. What are you looking at? Bring me wine. Jiang Pengji turned her head and scolded the stunned servant girl. "Bring me wine." The servant girl seemed to have woken up from a dream. Her mind was not clear yet, but her feet had already obediently retreated. She had completely forgotten that the most correct thing to do at this time should be to go forward to persuade and eliminate the conflict between the two parties as much as possible. She should not help the tyrant by giving Jiang Pengji wine. "Who allowed you to stick your head out?" Jiang Pengji smiled and stepped on one of their heads. She kicked him back into the hot spring with an undisguised evil and carefree expression on her face. "Who are you? How dare you touch me?" "Oh!" Before he could finish his sentence, Jiang Pengji stepped him back into the hot spring. Caught off guard, he choked on his nose and mouth. "Who am I?" Jiang Pengji took the wine jar that the servant girl handed over. She removed the seal and raised her head to drink a mouthful of wine. She quickly stepped on another person's head back into the water. The people who were watching the show could not sit still, but no one dared to stop Jiang Pengji. Among the two youths, which one was smaller? They were actually kicked into the hot spring by a teenager. Even if the stranger had the advantage of being caught off guard, it could be seen that he was not weak in martial arts. His leg skills were excellent. Looking at the teenager's appearance, it was obvious that he was half drunk and unconscious. If they went forward to stop the fight and were implicated by the other party without distinguishing between friend and foe, they would be humiliated and kicked into the hot spring as well. Wouldn't they want to die of shame? The heavens are watching what people do. Did your brains not come out of your mother's womb? You don't even know who you have offended, and you still have the face to threaten me. Who gave you the courage? Jiang Pengji scolded them sternly. Her eyes were sharp, and there was some hostility in them. With such a performance, no one dared to stop the fight. They could only call for the person in charge of the hot spring. "Help! Help!" The two of them wanted to climb out of the hot spring, but Jiang Pengji's legs were faster than their reaction speed. Their brains were about to be kicked silly. In the end, they had no choice but to shamefully ask for help. Naturally, they could not avoid choking on a few mouthfuls of hot soup. As soon as they opened their mouths to ask for help, Jiang Pengji laughed even more arrogantly. She looked at them as if they were two mice in boiling water. "Young Lang Jun, a man can be killed, but not humiliated. No matter how much hatred you have for these two, you should not be humiliated like this." Even if Jiang Pengji was drunk, such arrogant and humiliating actions still touched the sensitive nerves of many people. Jiang Pengji grinned and glared at the guy who begged for mercy. Chapter 269. Jiang Pengji's blunt retort made the man's face turn red and then green. She clicked her tongue, turned her head, and sneered at the two embarrassed young men who had choked on the hot soup. "Today, you two almost killed me and the people of Shangjing City. Why didn't you think about what would happen to you now?" The two drowned rats were full of hatred, but when they heard Jiang Pengji's words, they suddenly shivered and sobered up. They were terrified, and they didn't even dare to struggle. Many onlookers witnessed what happened. They were disgusted by Jiang Pengji's arrogant behavior, but after hearing her words and looking at the two men's guilty expressions, many smart people changed their expressions. They pretended nothing had happened and went on with what they were supposed to do. Obviously, the drunk teenager had suffered a loss at the hands of the two men and almost lost his life. Now, he was there to get back at them. It was better for outsiders not to get involved in this kind of dispute. Tisk, bullying the weak and fearing the strong. Jiang Pengji raised her head and drank a mouthful of wine. According to the way she drank, the jar of wine was going to be empty again. "Weren't you two very arrogant in the day? Why are you so cowardly now? Where's your backbone, your pride, your courage to use my life to take pleasure? Have they all been fed to the dogs? Haha, idiots." Jiang Pengji was not drunk. She was very sober. She was there to cause trouble, so she naturally wanted to vent her anger. It was Shangjing. She couldn't kill the two men, but she could stomp them into the ground in front of everyone. A villain intoxicated by success. At that moment, the surroundings were quiet. A crisp sound came from one side, and the atmosphere became more and more tense. Jiang Pengji maintained her sneer and looked at the person who said that. She asked in a dangerous tone, "Are you saying that I am a villain intoxicated by success?" The one who spoke was a young man in his early 20s. His skin was dyed a bit red because of the hot spring. His face was like jade and his eyes were like dots of lacquer. His dark cloud-like hair was wet and hung on both sides. Through the dense mist, his figure seemed a bit frail. "Aren't you a villain intoxicated by success?" The man was not afraid of Zhang Pengji's sneer. Instead, he snorted and said, "According to what you said just now, these two almost killed you by mistake. Since that's the case, you should be a gentleman and take revenge if you have a grudge against them. On the other hand, what you've done is to humiliate the two of them in public while you're drunk. What you've done is really inappropriate. To put it bluntly, wasn't this the behavior of a playboy?" The bullet screen in the streaming room stopped. Many viewers were afraid that Zhang Pengji would kill someone in the next second and stain the hot spring with blood. In fact, Zhang Pengji did not. Instead, she laughed cheerfully. She did not even tease the two fops. "If I'm a vile person, won't this Lang Jun be overflowing with the heart of a saint?" Zhang Pengji threw the wine jar in her hand into the hot spring. The water splashed and splashed on the faces of the two playboys. "I'm standing here today and humiliating them because I'm still alive. If I was unfortunately shot by that arrow and died on the spot, would you feel sorry for me?" Zhang Pengji snorted coldly. "I know you can't do it. After all, you're not related to me. The dead will always be dead. They're not as important as the living. If you still want them to live, shut up, or I'll kill them myself." The young man's face changed. He said, "You're really twisting words and forcing logic. You're taking advantage of your ancestors' influence to commit such crimes." "You're wrong. They're taking advantage of their ancestors' influence to amuse themselves with the lives of the commoners. If the commoners die, they'll be scolded at most. No one in the King of Hell can uphold justice for the dead." Zhang Pengji suddenly raised her voice and said, "If you want to reprimand someone, you should first scold these two beasts who are worse than pigs and dogs, instead of speaking righteously to me. I'm just taking revenge if I have a grudge, that's all." "How can commoners be compared to gentry?" the young man retorted. Zhang Pengji was so angry that she almost laughed. She scolded him back. "Did a donkey kick you in the head?" The young man suddenly opened his eyes wide. He didn't expect Zhang Pengji to scold him so crudely. What was the difference between that and pointing at someone's nose and scolding them? This young Lang Jun is right. Zuda, you shouldn't confuse the truth just because commoners are cheap and gentry are precious. Although the young Lang Jun was reckless and impulsive, he was also a man of character. There was a reason for his actions, and he should be considerate. However, you've really crossed the line by scolding him so harshly. Zuda is thin-skinned. He can't stand such abuse." When the atmosphere was tense, a mellow laughter interrupted them. It was a little teasing. Zhang Pengji frowned and looked toward the direction of the sound. She saw a middle-aged man with gray hair and beard, but he didn't look old. He was hale and hearty, and his steps were light. When the man appeared, the young man's expression changed. He bowed to him and said respectfully, "Master, are you the young Lang Jun of Lu County Chief's family?" The middle-aged man came to Zhang Pengji. His eyes seemed to have seen through everything. Zhang Pengji frowned. He said, "You're indeed a dragon among men. You look extraordinary." "Who are you?" Zhang Pengji didn't even bother to pretend to be drunk because of the man. She looked at him with burning eyes. The young man, who was called Zuda, was dissatisfied with her arrogant behavior. His master was respected by everyone. When had he ever been stared at so rudely? Zhang Pengji's previous behavior left a bad impression on him. The young man hated her even more. The middle-aged man smiled kindly and raised his hand to stop the student. "I thought you should know. I'm not talented, so people give me a nickname, Yuan Jing." "Yuan Jing?" Zhang Pengji's mouth twitched. She didn't expect to see the legendary master Yuan Jing under such circumstances. He looked like an ordinary middle-aged man who had just finished soaking in the hot spring. He didn't seem to be as mysterious as the rumors said. Master Yuan Jing laughed. He was quite optimistic. His eyes slightly curved like a crescent moon. "In Shangjing, a piece of tile can kill 3 high officials. Young Lang Jun, you're a newborn calf that's not afraid of tigers. You can do anything." Zhang Pengji clicked her tongue and said with a smile, "No, you're wrong. I still have my concerns. Otherwise, these two people would have been killed on the spot. They wouldn't have just drunk a few mouthfuls of hot spring water." After that, she thought of something. Actually, according to what your student said, the gentry are more noble than the common people. But there are different levels among the gentry. Naturally, I'm more noble than these two people. They offended me, so no matter how I humiliate them, it shouldn't be wrong. The young man named Zuda was speechless. Chapter 270. That's a bunch of nonsense. The young man was enraged by Jiang Pengji's words. It was hard for him to maintain his elegant demeanor. Jiang Pengji snorted. She looked at Master Yuan Jing and then at the young man named Zuda. She mocked. You said that I'm talking nonsense, but why don't you take a look at what's in your head? The sage said that the people are more important than the king. If the king is like this, how can the gentry be more important than the people? You said that I rely on my ancestors, but you can argue with me here because you have a good ancestor, right? Jiang Pengji did not like the young man named Zuda. She realized that not only did he have the heart of a saint, but he was also retarded. The young man was speechless. Jiang Pengji spoke again, but this time, she was not talking to the young man. She was asking Master Yuan Jing. I thought that Master Yuan Jing was famous, so he should be very careful when he accepted disciples. How could he be so old and blind that he accepted such an extreme and stubborn blockhead as his student? She did not hide her disdain for the young man when she said that. This time, the young man was so angry that he couldn't even speak a word. His face was flushed red. He did not care how Jiang Pengji attacked him, but he could not let her implicate his respected teacher. Master Yuan Jing was not angry. Instead, he looked at Jiang Pengji meaningfully. Humans are not perfect. Even saints are like this, let alone ordinary people. As a teacher, you need to know that teaching is not discriminatory. Then you can teach and solve doubts. Although Zuda is wrong, he has his merits. How can you just look at one side and deny everything about him? If what you said is true, Langyi Academy should be empty. I'm not a perfect teacher, and I'm not qualified to be a teacher. It was because of his shortcomings that he needed to learn. It would take more than 1 or 2 days to correct, not to mention a well-formed temperament. Master Yuan Jing said calmly. There was even a smile on his face that made Jiang Pengji feel uncomfortable. If one had to describe his smile, it would be cunning. Master Yuan Jing was respected by the people and the students. It was not only because he fought for the 3 cities from the royal court of the north borderline when he was young, nor was it because he was knowledgeable. More importantly, it was because he treated his students equally. Whether it was the son of a noble or the descendant of a peddler, in his eyes, a student was just a student. He would not look up to a student because he was outstanding or had a noble background, nor would he look down on a student because he was stubborn or had a lowly background. As long as their nature wasn't bad, their roots weren't rotten, and there was still room for improvement, then they were worthy of his careful guidance. Jiang Pengji said, "You're quite protective." Mr. Yuan Jing said calmly, "Zuda's nature isn't bad. He's just a little paranoid, but he can still change." Jiang Pengji squinted her eyes and said, "Oh." She suddenly raised her hand and pointed at the 2 people who were still in the hot spring and did not dare to come out. "In your opinion, what do you think about these 2 people?" When she asked this question, many people who were watching the show pricked up their ears, and the person in question even had his heart in his throat. Being targeted by Lu, she meant that they were not fated to be officials, but if Mr. Yuan Jing praised them, there was still a chance. Mr. Yuan Jing suddenly smiled. He raised his hand and stroked his gray beard. His eyes were a little bright. It was said that one's eyes could reflect one's true age. Mr. Yuan Jing took good care of himself, but he still looked like he was in his 30s or 40s. His eyes were clear and bright, with a deep wisdom. It was impossible to guess his real age just by looking at his eyes. Mr. Yuan Jing had seen people who held grudges and aggressive people, but it was rare to see someone like Jiang Pengji. He said, looking at his behavior, he has a dignified appearance and is made of gold and jade. Looking at his inside, he has a belly full of rubbish and is rotten inside. Are you satisfied with this answer, Lang Jun? Lu Xi alone would not let the 2 young men have an easy time, but she dragged him into this mess. She was trying to push them to the edge of death. Really, she was evil, he thought. How could Mr. Yuan Jing not see that he was being used by Jiang Pengji? But he did not like to be calculative with the younger generation, so he did not expose her. Mr. Yuan Jing's evaluation was like a bolt from the blue to the 2 young men's ears. Although they were in the warm hot spring, They felt like they had fallen into an ice cellar. A terrifying chill spread from the soles of their feet to the top of their heads. Lu Shi had cut off their path to fame. Mr. Yuanjing's evaluation was enough to make them lose their footing in Dongqing. Zhang Pengji smiled with satisfaction. Her eyes were slightly curved like the bright crescent moon, which was similar to Mr. Yuanjing's. I drank too much just now. Please forgive me if I offended you. Mr. Yuanjing shook his head helplessly. She was taking advantage of the old man's age, but he was not blind. He could see clearly whether Zhang Pengji was really drunk or pretending to be drunk. It's okay. It's just that drinking hurts the liver. It's better for young people to drink less. Zuda, let's go. I'm sorry, master. I was rude today, so you were put in a difficult position by a kid. After leaving the waterside pavilion, the young man named Zuda hung his head low like a rooster who had lost a fight. He was unhappy. Mr. Yuanjing folded his hands in his wide sleeves. His footsteps were leisurely as if he was taking a stroll in the park. Zuda, look at that young Lang Jun. What do you think of him? The young man turned his face away. He was still angry. He has a sharp tongue and a bunch of crooked reasoning. Mr. Yuanjing did not comment. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "What else?" The young man was speechless. He could not say anything else for a long time. Mr. Yuanjing sighed and said, "You were blinded by anger and resentment, which affected your judgment. This is a taboo for a strategist. You can't judge a person by his appearance. You have to observe his words and actions carefully. You have to find out the reason behind it. Otherwise, even if that young Lang Jun is a dragon among men, you won't be able to see him. Isn't it a pity?" He spoke calmly. His tone was like he was talking about family matters and not lecturing a student. The young man was not convinced. "Did you say that the young man is a dragon among men? Such a high evaluation?" Mr. Yuanjing stopped and turned his head to smile at the young man. "Not even 1 in a million." The young man was speechless. "It's just that this person is too stubborn and easy to break. His temper is so flamboyant. It's easy for him to get into trouble." Mr. Yuanjing pondered and sighed. "He's like a piece of unpolished jade. Although he has natural beauty, he hasn't been carefully carved. People don't know his inner qualities, so they treat him like a stubborn stone." More importantly, she had the mandate of an emperor, but she was a girl. Mr. Yuanjing secretly raised his eyebrows when he thought about that. The old man was not blind. He could tell if Zhang Pengji was a boy or a girl. Since Mr. Yuanjing was so sure about Zhang Pengji, the young man could calm down no matter how unconvinced he was. He looked at her objectively. He muttered and felt slightly wronged. "I'm blind. I only see that this person is arrogant and bullying the weak." Mr. Yuanjing smiled like a naughty child and teased him. "So, I'm your teacher, and you're my student." The young man was speechless. Chapter 271. Since Master Yuanjing was bringing a few students with him, the hot spring that he had requested was very big. There was even a smaller companion spring inside. There was a pavilion, a terrace, and a waterside pavilion. It was enough for the master and his students to have fun. This was also the most luxurious private room in the hot spring hotel. If he wasn't Master Yuanjing, who was famous in Dongqing, he wouldn't have been able to get such a good room. Zuda accompanied Master Yuanjing back. When he was about to open the door for the master, he saw Master Yuanjing wave his hand with a playful expression. "Listen, is there anything strange?" The young man, Zuda, was confused. They didn't go to the wrong room. Why was the master keeping them in suspense? "Master, what's wrong?" Master Yuanjing smiled and said, "Usually they follow the rules and etiquette, but they like to play around in private. When I'm not here, how can it be so peaceful if they don't play around? Therefore, there should be a distinguished guest. Zuda, what do you think of my appearance?" The young man choked and then said seriously, "Master, you are handsome and spirited. You don't lose to the young people." Master Yuanjing nodded in agreement and said, "I think so too." The young man was speechless. He opened the door with the air of a knowledgeable scholar. His clear eyes scanned the inner room and he understood. He saw the person he expected and said, "I haven't seen you for many years. How have you been, Chief Lu?" Because of Gu Min, the Lu residents and Master Yuanjing had some connections. The The two families had contact with each other. Even though Gu Min had passed away many years ago, the second wife didn't forget to send gifts to Master Yuan Jing during festivals. The two families had a good relationship. The distinguished guest that Master Yuan Jing mentioned was no doubt Lu Shi. As for Feng Ren, he was just there to join in the fun. The teacher secretly glanced at a few of his students. They were well behaved because Lu Shi and Feng Ren were there. Each of them was acting like a gentleman. One of them was reciting, two of them were competing, or three of them were discussing poetry collections in secret, whispering to each other. They were quite good at bluffing. Lu Shi had been waiting for a while. When he saw Master Yuan Jing finally appear, he couldn't help but feel relieved. To be honest, this hot spring room was poisonous. Any student who mentioned it seemed to be famous in history or unofficial history. He felt a little pressured. He went forward to greet Master Yuan Jing, and the two of them sat down. Before Lu Shi could speak, Master Yuan Jing said, "I know why you're here, County Chief Lu." Lu Shi opened his mouth and swallowed the polite words he wanted to say to warm up the situation. He asked, "Since that's the case, what do you think?" The other students seemed to be very serious, but in fact, all of them pricked up their ears to listen to the purpose of County Chief Lu's visit. "I have said before that I will accept 4 people as my disciples according to fate. A while ago, I had already accepted a filial disciple. For people have reached the age limit, so I will not accept any more disciples. Your son is a dragon among men. If you don't mind Langi Academy, you can come and study here. You are most welcome." Master Yuan Jing shook his head, but he did not look regretful. "Moreover, even without Zixiao, your Lang Jun and I are not fated to be master and disciple." Lu Shi felt a little annoyed. He hadn't said anything yet, but the old man in front of him had already said everything he could. However, he didn't force it. His initial plan was to go to Langi Academy and leave everything else to fate. Now, it could be said that his wish had been fulfilled. That's good. Then I'll temporarily entrust this mischievous son of mine to Mr. I hope Mr. will take good care of him. Master Yuan Jing said half-truthfully, "Your son is full of anger. If I don't take care of him, my Langi Academy will be overturned." Lu Shi's facial expression changed slightly when he heard that. If others heard Master Yuan Jing's words, they would definitely think that Master Yuan Jing despised Lu Shi's son for being naughty or difficult to discipline. But Lu Shi understood what Master Yuan Jing was implying. Master Yuan Jing and Master Liaochen seemed to be able to see that Lanting's fate was extraordinary. Master Liaochen once said that there were less than 5 people in the 5 kingdoms who could see the emperor's aura around Jiang Pengji. However, his daughter seemed to be unlucky. Not only did she meet Master Liaochen, but she also met Master Yuan Jing. Haha, I am not a talkative person. You can rest assured, County Chief Lu. Master Yuan Jing saw through Jiang Pengji's physiognomy, but he did not expose her. Instead, he quietly covered up for her. It was obvious that he did not have the same opinion as others. According to the scholar's point of view, a woman with the emperor's fate was a demoness who brought disaster to the country. At their level, they had already broken away from the restrictions that ordinary people had. Otherwise, how could they be called masters? Many times, even if they saw something, they would keep quiet. Lu Shi forced a smile. "If Lanting is really so naughty and overturns your academy, the Lus will help you rebuild the academy even if we have to spend all our fortune." Master Yuan Jing stroked his beard and said, "County Chief Lu, I am looking forward to it." Lu Shi was speechless. Looking forward to it? At that moment, Master Yuan Jing added, "The roof of the east wing was blown open by the strong wind last time. The students are not good at repairing it, but it still leaks every rainy day. If you really help the academy rebuild it, the children will not have to climb up the roof." Lu Shi was speechless. "I can't believe you are this kind of Master Yuan Jing." In Lu Shi's mind, Master Yuan Jing should be as bright as the moon. He should be a noble person who was hard to get in touch with. Now that he met him, how should he put it? It felt like his idol had been shattered. It seemed that Master Yuan Jing was too down to earth. Feng Ren, who was beside Lu Shi, was also stunned as if he had been struck by lightning. No one would have thought that Master Yuan Jing, who was said to be otherworldly, was like an old child in reality. "If that's the case, I will go and call my son here so that you can take a look at him." Master Yuan Jing smiled and said, "There is no hurry. I have just seen the little Lang Jun outside. He is indeed a bright and healthy child. There is no need to trouble you, County Chief Lu. I will let my students run errands for you. Why don't you play a game with an old man like me? For some reason, when Lu Shi heard Master Yuanjing talk about his daughter like that, he suddenly felt uneasy. It was understandable that he had a bright and clean face, but where did he see that he was healthy and healthy? Not only was Lu Shi confused, but the young man from Zuda University who followed Master Yuanjing was also confused. How could that rude teenager be the Lang Jun of County Chief Lu? Then I will have to trouble you. Lu Shi looked calm, but he felt a little uneasy. He felt that his daughter was stirring up trouble again. Zuda, go and make the arrangements. I will have a game with County Chief Lu. Everyone knew that Master Yuanjing was proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. But his students knew that Master Yuanjing loved to play chess. He would often play chess and entertain himself for the whole night. Master Yuanjing held a black chess piece with his back facing the door. It was as if he had eyes on the back of his head. He said to the young man who had just crossed the door, Zixiao, go and call for the number 3 Tianzi room in the Fenghe courtyard. Tell her that the little Longjuan's father wants her to come here. The young man seemed to have just finished bathing. His black hair was wet and his shoulders were wet. Hearing his master's order, he didn't doubt it. He lowered his eyes and agreed. That little friend is also Master Yuanjing's student? Lu Shi looked up and almost threw the chess piece. He even forgot to ask a question. Chapter 272. Master Yuanjing smiled and asked Lu Shi, You mean Zixiao? I took him in a while ago, so it can be said that I have made up for my regret. By the time he finished speaking, the young man had already turned around and left, leaving behind only a slightly thin and tall silhouette. Lu Shi's eyes widened as if he had thought of something. After a long while he said in a low voice, So, he is Mr.'s 4th disciple. His appearance is indeed extraordinary. Although he said that, he was secretly suspicious. When did Wei Zixiao become Yuanjing's disciple? He was bewildered, and his eyes darkened. Wei Ci was from Langia and was also studying in Langia. However, due to the changes in his family, he left Dongqing with his entire family. Master Yuanjing squinted his eyes. His cold gaze seemed to have seen through everything. Seeing Lu Shi's reaction, he said meaningfully, Originally, I couldn't have accepted this disciple. Although we were destined to be master and disciple, we were not master and disciple. Lu Shi's hand that was holding the chess piece paused. His face was filled with curiosity and suspicion. If that's the case, why did you accept him as your disciple? You don't know this, but Zixiao has a knot in his heart. This also causes him to be intelligent, but he also likes to get into a dead end. If he's not careful, he'll step onto the wrong path. In the past, I wanted to take him as my disciple twice, but he refused both times. Now that he is willing to be enlightened, I am naturally overjoyed. To Yuanjing, there was nothing more gratifying than seeing a promising seedling untie the knot in his heart and grow strong and healthy. Lu Shi was completely dumbfounded, as if he had just heard a heavenly book. There had always been others chasing after Yuanjing to be his disciple. How could there be someone who could make Yuanjing chase after him? Wei Xiai. Ah Min only said that he was a good strategist. Simply put, they were the prettiest among the smart and the smartest among the beauties. This was a man who used his face to brush official history, and his schemes only appeared in unofficial history books. So, Master Yuanjing, are you sure you're not joking? To be loved by Mr. so much, he must not be weak in any aspect. Lu Shi tried his best to maintain his composure so that he would not reveal any flaws. Of course. Zixiao, it's IKEA. Lu Shi and Feng Ren, who was watching the game, were speechless. Wait. IKEA. IKEA. Are you sure there's nothing wrong with this description? Dong dong dong. Jiang Pengji was lazily soaking in the hot spring. A neatly folded towel rested on her forehead. Her long black hair was fixed at the top of her head with a hairpin, revealing her slender and fair neck. Her skin was covered with water droplets. Because of the fog, it was as if she had a filter on her entire body. Although she was still wearing clothes, the audience in the live broadcast room expressed that they could not take it anymore. Sugar-fried chestnuts. #perverted. I really want to climb in and have a bath with the streamer. Streamer Vangjing Xianghua. There are always unruly people who want to compete with me for the streamer. Hearing the knock on the door, Jiang Pengji opened her tipsy eyes. There was a faint blush on her face from the steam, as if she had applied a layer of top-notch powder on it. Did the maidservant bring the wine? She raised her eyebrows and said lazily, "Come in. Just leave the wine by the side of the pool." Outside the house, Wei Ci, who had obtained permission, opened the door slightly. Hot and humid air blew into his face, and his vision was filled with white mist. The audience in the streaming room was the first to notice the abnormality. At that moment, Jiang Pengji was still lazily half-lidded. One chestnut. "Host, stop sleeping. There's a strange man coming in. Be careful." Lao Siji Lianming. It's a man, not a maidservant. "Host, don't sleep over. Be careful not to be taken advantage of." Wei Feng Tang Tang. "Host, stop sleeping. Get up quickly." Someone reminded Jiang Pengji. Naturally, there were also people who noticed the strange man's appearance. But in a flash, the bullet screen full of infatuated fans covered all the reminders. It was an unprecedented grand occasion. Looking at the changes in the bullet screen, Jiang Pengji frowned slightly. She did not need to turn her head to guess the person's magnificent appearance. The audience in the streaming room did not have any other good points, but they had a normal sense of beauty. Not every beautiful face could make them lick the screen. "You seem to have entered the wrong door," Jiang Pengji said without turning her head. She supported herself with both arms by the side of the pool and relaxed her whole body. The strange man outside did not come in. Instead, he lowered his head and spoke in a low voice. His voice was between a teenager and an adult. "I am Wei Ci. Your father has summoned you to Tianzi room number 1 in the Rose Garden." Hearing that, Jiang Pengji suddenly turned her head to look at the man. She asked, "Are you talking about my father?" Wei Ci's body stiffened imperceptibly. He suddenly lowered his head and immediately returned to normal. It was as if the abnormality had never occurred. He said with certainty, "Yes, your father is playing chess with my master. He specially ordered me to come over and pass on the message." Jiang Pengji secretly rubbed the area between her eyebrows. Although it was very comfortable to soak in the hot spring, one could not soak in it for too long. "Why are you so reserved, Lang Jun? Wait a moment. I will go with you after I tidy up." "It's okay. Help yourself." The next second, the door closed again. There was a vague shadow at the door. It was obvious that the person had not left. Seeing that, Jiang Pengji frowned but did not say anything. Climbing out of the hot spring, she temporarily closed the streaming room. After a simple wipe, she changed into a dry robe. After doing all that, she reopened the streaming room and pushed open the paper door at the same time. She said to Wei Ci, who was kneeling at the door, "Please lead the way, Lang Jun." At that moment, without the cover of the fog, Wei Ci's appearance was clearly visible to her. Seeing him in person, she could understand why the look-alike person in the streaming room was so excited. His long, black hair was warm and damp. It draped over his shoulders, leaving wet marks. The ends of his hair were dripping with water droplets. His face was like jade and his skin was like fine porcelain. Because of the heat, his cheeks were a little flushed, giving people a slightly intoxicated feeling. His hair was like a knife, his eyebrows were like ink, and his pure black eyes were cold and calm. When he looked at Jiang Pengji, he did not reveal the slightest emotion. It was as if he had emptied his mind. Not to mention anything else. Just this alone made Jiang Pengji feel that it was interesting. It seemed that she had just met this young man for the first time. Why did he have such a high level of vigilance against her? Her eyes turned and a plan came to her mind. Jiang Pengji knelt on one knee and moved slightly closer to the young man. Her pair of eyes that seemed calm could not help but ripple. "If it wasn't for the fact that you have an Adam's apple and don't have ear piercings, I would have thought that you were a young lady. You actually came to the hot spring alone." Wei Ci's face was cold. He leaned back slightly and distanced himself from Jiang Pengji. He frowned slightly in displeasure. "Young Lang Jun, this joke is a little too much. I don't like people talking about my appearance for fun." Jiang Pengji stood up and crossed her arms in front of her chest. "I was obviously praising you for your good looks." Wei Ci pursed his lips tightly and stood up to lead the way. He said coldly, "I am a man. It is really rude to compare me with a woman." Jiang Pengji was speechless. Oh, he has quite a temper. Lanting. A familiar yet slightly doubtful voice interjected. Chapter 273. Tiesketeske. I was wondering who it was. So it's the famous Fenger Lang Jun. It's really easy to find traces of you. Jiang Pengji walked to the side of the corridor, which was separated from Feng Jin by a pond. The two of them conversed through the air. Feng Jin felt wronged. He did not know that Jiang Pengji would be in Shangjing at that time. If he had known earlier, he definitely wouldn't have come out to soak in the spring with his classmates. Just now, when he was leaning against the railing and looking into the distance, he suddenly saw a familiar figure. He thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him, but he didn't expect that it was really his friend. I haven't seen you in a few months. Lanting's glib tongue has only increased. You're able to pin a groundless crime on me without any hesitation. Feng Jin smiled. At that moment, a classmate beside him called out to him. Feng Jin apologetically said to Jiang Pengji, Lanting, please don't blame me. We'll catch up later. After Jiang Pengji greeted him, she realized that Wei Ci was looking coldly at Feng Jin's back as he turned around. I just met an acquaintance. Wei Lang Jun, please lead the way. Wei Ci withdrew his gaze and did not say a word. One after the other, they soon arrived at the Rose Courtyard Sky Room 1. Lanting, come here. This is Master Yuan Jing. In the future, when you learn from teacher, you must remember not to be naughty and mischievous. Lu Shi's chess skills were not bad, but compared to Master Yuan Jing, he was still lacking. So, he lost without feeling depressed or embarrassed. By the time Wei Ci brought him over, the chessboard had already lost its momentum. Lu Shi decided to divert his attention. Master Yuan Jing said to Jiang Pengji, Little friend, we meet again. Hello, sir. She greeted him obediently and said to Lu Shi, Don't worry, father. I know. At this moment Wei Ci, who was talking to his classmate in a low voice, glanced at her out of the corner of his eye, then quietly shifted his gaze. Master Yuan Jing was addicted to chess. How could it be enough to defeat Lu Shi? I'll call you Lanting. He shifted his gaze to Jiang Pengji and asked, Will you play a game with me? As you wish. Jiang Pengji did not know how to play chess, but Lu Shi had learned it before. Although his chess skills were not very good, his basic skills were very solid. She, who had inherited Lu Shi's memories, naturally knew how to play chess. The opening was a little miserable. Feng Ran and Lu Shi, the two observers, couldn't stand it anymore. They wanted to roll up their sleeves and play the game themselves. Lu Shi was even more suspicious. His daughter's chess skills were not that bad. How did Wei Yuan teach him? Unexpectedly, Master Yuan Jing acted like a beginner. He placed his chess pieces randomly, and no one could figure out what he was planning. As a player, Jiang Pengji understood that the other party was intentionally guiding her. Jiang Pengji couldn't help but be more serious about the game. She went through Lu Shi's memories in detail in her mind. After familiarizing herself with the game, she used her own method to calculate. The speed at which she placed the chess pieces became slower and slower. In the end, she had to think for half a cup of tea before she placed a chess piece. At that moment, Master Yuan Jing suddenly smiled. The game of chess had finally begun. Master Yuan Jing looked at the chessboard and smiled. I've won this round. Jiang Pengji pursed her lips so tightly that they almost formed a straight line. There was still some heat in her eyes. One more round. No more, no more. Master Yuan Jing shook his head and looked a little tired. I'm already old. How can I compete with young people in terms of energy? Lanting, if you still want to play chess, Zixiao is the best among all of us. You can play 2 rounds with him. Jiang Pengji frowned and looked at Wei Ci. Wei Ci narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, I'm not feeling well. It's not convenient for me to play with you. Jiang Pengji was speechless. She didn't do anything to him, did she? Why is he so angry? Not only was Jiang Pengji surprised, but Wei Ci's classmates who were close to him were also confused. What's wrong with Zixiao today? Why do I feel like he's a different person? You think so too? Did that Lu Xiao Langjun unintentionally make fun of his appearance? Although in this day and age, the beauty standard of men was based on gentleness, the more feminine, the better. Their bodies were delicate and soft, and they would be blown away by the wind. There were some people who hated that kind of atmosphere. Xueqi was one of them. He hated being treated as a woman, and he hated it even more when others made a fuss about his appearance. If Lu Shi violated this taboo and was treated coldly by Xueqi, it seemed to make sense. Zhang Pengji's hearing was amazing. Naturally, she didn't miss the discussion. She was also confused. At most, he just said that he was good-looking. Did he have to be so angry? However, she wasn't a credit, nor was she gold or silver. She couldn't expect everyone to like her. If Xueqi didn't like her, so be it. It wasn't like she would lose a piece of flesh. Zhang Pengji soon forgot about this detail. She sat quietly at the side and watched the others play. Lu Shi, Feng Ran, and the other elders were also sensible. They knew that their presence would make the others feel uncomfortable, so they simply found an excuse to leave. However, before Lu Shi left, he winked at his daughter. "Don't give yourself away, my daughter. Do you know how to play the drinking game?" Zhang Pengji was young. The others were either in their 20s or about the same age. She, a teenager, sat quietly in the corner and watched the others play and talk. No matter how one looked at it, the scene was a little sad and pitiful. Therefore, someone took the initiative to talk to her. She was silent for a while, then said, "I know how to drink." "Haha, you're still young. You only took a few sips of wine. How can you say that you know how to drink?" The other party smiled and patted her shoulder as if they were close friends. "We'll be classmates from now on. When you arrive at the academy, if anyone makes things difficult for you, just tell them my name." She listened and nodded shyly. Her big, watery eyes were wide open. If a screenshot was taken, it could probably be named Zhang Pengji's Cleverness JPG. The drinking game was originally an activity to liven things up during banquets. Zhang Pengji also knew some of the rules. All the youths present were top students. Even if a few of them weren't that great, they were the type that could make up for their inadequacies with hard work. When they played the drinking game, the content was naturally as difficult as possible. Poems, songs, and essays were all over the place. There were also obscure geographical knowledge, unofficial history, and biographies. In short, although they couldn't understand it, they always felt that it was awesome. After an hour, Zhang Pengji's brain was stuffed with words. She rested her chin on her hand and looked indifferent. She felt someone was approaching her. She turned her head and saw Xueqi, who had a bad temper, push a tray toward her. There were all kinds of dried fruits and snacks on the tray. He looked down and avoided Zhang Pengji's sight. Zhang Pengji was surprised and asked, "Did I offend you in any way?" Xueqi didn't answer her question. "I heard Wenbin mention you a few days ago." Zhang Pengji was stunned. She suddenly remembered the words she used to fool Han Yu. She used to fool Han Yu by saying that she had seen Cheng Jing and Xueqi in her dream. She even described Xueqi as beautiful. "Huh. Was it because of that?" She coughed awkwardly and said with a lack of confidence, "It was just a misunderstanding. I used it to fool him." Sure enough, a lie needed several lies to cover up the loophole. Xueqi said calmly, "It's okay. Since you didn't mean it, I won't hold it against you." Zhang Pengji secretly squinted her eyes. A glimmer of light flashed in her eyes. It would have been better if Xueqi didn't explain. The more he explained, the more she felt that he was trying to hide something. Chapter 274. Xueqi looked at Zhang Pengji's side profile, and his heart was filled with complicated feelings. She was like a savage, bloodthirsty, and ferocious beast that lived on human flesh staring at his fragile neck. Her snow-white teeth had some minced meat on them, and saliva was dripping from them. He could smell the stench coming from the tip of his nose. The shadow of death shrouded him. He thought he was going to die, but in the next second, she turned into a palm-sized white cat and meowed at him in a cute and crisp manner. It was probably an illusion. "But why do I always feel that you are deliberately guarding against me? Do I eat people like a Rakshasa?" Zhang Pengji held her cheeks in puzzlement. Her lips curled into a faint smile, and she asked him innocently. Of course, it was only an illusion. Xueqi gathered his thoughts. His nerves were tense, as if he was facing a formidable enemy, but he calmly narrated on the surface. "Little Lang Jun, you misunderstood me. When did I deliberately guard against you? Ci and Lang Jun are not familiar with each other, so I should keep my distance. Zhang Pengji squinted her eyes and suddenly moved closer to him. Wei Ci's reaction was also very interesting. He was like a frightened rabbit. She sneered in her heart when she saw him suddenly lean back. Instead of retreating, she moved closer to Wei Ci and whispered in his ear. They were so close, but she could clearly feel the trembling of his body. That kind of fear and panic, which could not be controlled by reason, made her more curious. Wei Zixiao. Zhang Pengji deliberately pretended to be innocent and restored her previous cold and serious tone. She said, I don't know why you are so guarded against me, and even afraid of me like a snake, but I hope you understand that the more you act so clearly, the more it arouses my curiosity and desire to investigate. So, are you avoiding me, or are you playing hard to get? It was unknown which sentence provoked Wei Ci, but his reaction was about to explode. Dong. The movement in the corner attracted the attention of others. They saw a young person single-handedly holding Wei Ci's hands. His expression was cold and his eyes were fierce. On the other hand, the restrained Wei Ci was lying on the ground in a slightly embarrassed state. Perhaps because of the struggle or something else, his cheeks were dyed red. With a plop, a student sitting by the hot spring saw the scene and was so shocked that he dropped the fruit plate in his hand. What happened? Sorry, I'm just messing around. You guys continue. Zhang Pengji smiled as if there was no one around. She changed her posture from a half-kneeling position to a kneeling position. She raised her hand and released the hand that was restraining Wei Ci's wrist. Those with better eyesight could clearly see the faint finger marks left on Wei Ci's wrist. They were playing a little too hard. Wei Ci's chest heaved up and down rapidly. His facial expression was a few degrees below zero. He looked at Zhang Pengji with bloodshot eyes. You tried to push me away just now. I instinctively thought you were going to attack me, so... Spreading out her hands, Zhang Pengji had a look that said, This is not my fault. Wei Ci pursed his lips tightly and did not say a word for a while. Wei Ci propped himself up from the ground and ignored the words of concern from the people around him. He strode out of the hot spring room. As long as one was not blind, anyone could see the huge words on Wei Ci's back. I'm angry. The culprit who provoked Wei Ci, Zhang Pengji, was dumbfounded. She did not want to take the blame. She did not want to offend Wei Ci. After all, he was one of Master Yuanjing's 4 disciples. He had his own connections in Langyi Academy. He was a bully that could not be offended. She wanted to go to school, not to fight. Why would she provoke Wei Ci for no reason? However, the current situation was that she did not want to offend Wei Ci. Wei Ci came up to her and made her offend him. In the end, he even put the blame on her. What af * king injustice. Oh, you're the little princess. You have the final say. The audience in the streaming room was rather disappointed. They thought the streamer was going to live stream driving. They did not expect that she would not even drive a toy car. Nide Yida, #perverted. Just now, the streamer confined him to the ground with one hand. I thought she was going to drive. Streamer Wengjing Shanghua. I used to think that the domineering CEO was very cliché. But now I understand why such a cliché is popular. It's entirely because at the moment when you're pinned against the wall, you feel the thrill of being conquered. Streamer Xijing Shanghua. Streamer, shouldn't that be called Dong? If she stood against the wall, she would probably only hit her chest. Looking at the discussion of the audience in the streaming room, Zhang Pengji could not help but have an illusion. She bullied the little princess. But the problem was that she was really not that crazy. Not only did the audience in the streaming room think so, but even the audience who were watching the live broadcast thought so. Although Zixiao is born beautiful, he is a real man. The person who had tried to get close to Zhang Pengji came over. It was unknown whether he was gloating or something else. Although we have many sworn brothers now, you are still a little young at your age. After he finished speaking, he raised his eyebrows at her and gave her a look that all men understood. Zhang Pengji's face darkened after she heard that. Wei Ci left the hot spring room. The cold wind outside blew and cleared his feverish mind. Just as Zhang Pengji said, if he behaved as usual and did not reveal any abnormalities, the other party would probably not even look at him. That was exactly what he wanted. But he was not mentally prepared. He showed an abnormality and attracted the other party's attention. The current situation was the complete opposite of his original plan. He stood in the corridor in a daze. The bright white moon in the sky was reflected on the pond. The scenery was pleasant and it made his state of mind slightly calm. Now that he had calmed down, he did not intend to go back. He was afraid that he would give himself away again. Only God knew that what Zhang Pengji said just now scared him to the point that all the hair on his body stood on end. He was almost scared out of his wits. Forget it, forget it. I will treat her as usual. Wei Ci calmed down for a while and gave himself enough psychological hints. Only when he felt that he could face Zhang Pengji normally did he turn around and return to the hot spring room. Just as he opened the door, he saw that there was no one inside. There were some liquor tags scattered on the low table. He looked at the empty hot spring room and was stunned. Where is she? She went to cause trouble. Zhang Pengji felt that there were a lot of things to do today. She did not soak in the hot spring much, but she encountered a lot of annoying things. Especially after she was wronged by the little princess, Wei Ci. Something came to her door immediately after. This time, it was her friend, Feng Jin, who called for help from outside. When she arrived, the matter was already a little out of hand. Feng Jin, who was originally elegant and graceful, looked angry. His face was covered with bruises. The bruises on his white jade-like face were very eye-catching. Feng Jin was the second legitimate son of the head of the secretariat, Feng Ren, who had the guts to hit him and even hit his face. Zhang Pengji saw that not only was Feng Jin's face injured, but his arm was also cut by a knife. Half of his arm was almost dyed red. She was furious. Chapter 275. Feng Jin was grimacing in pain, but when he heard Zhang Pengji's arrogant declaration, his hand stopped hurting, but his stomach hurt. If they were in Hejian County, it would be fine for her to be so arrogant. At least Lu she could handle it. But now, they were in Shangjing, where the emperor was. She did not have the advantage of being a local snake, but she could still be so arrogant. Thinking of his humility just now, in exchange for such humiliation and a knife to his arm, he suddenly felt that it was better to be arrogant. Lanting, be careful. These people are not friendly. Feng Jin covered his wound with his left hand. Blood kept flowing out from between his fingers. His face was pale because of the pain and blood loss. Even his voice was very weak. Messengers from the royal family of the northern borderline. Zhang Pengji looked at the few strong men who were confronting the people in the courtyard. Each of them had small braids of black hair and a floral scarf on their heads. Their thick eyebrows slanted to the temples, and their faces were deep and well-defined. She could tell at a glance that they were foreigners. They were naked from the waist up. There were strange and complicated tattoos on their shoulders and chests. One could vaguely see that they were ferocious beasts. Their muscles bulged like stones, and one of their arms was thicker than Feng Jin's thigh. Their skin was oiled and could even reflect light. Oh, messengers from the royal family of the northern borderline? Zhang Pengji sneered coldly and took 2 steps forward. The crowd automatically made way for her. Feng Jin, you've lived like a dog, haven't you? You're the son of the head of the secretariat, and you're being bullied like this? They're just watchdogs. They're not the descendants of the royal family of the northern borderline, and you're beaten up like this. You're a disgrace to your father. Feng Jin's expression changed. He was not angry at Zhang Pengji's harsh words, but it was the truth. The son of the head of the secretariat was beaten up in the hot spring house under Prince Changshuo's name, and his important right arm was also injured. Because of this injury, it was very likely that he would not be able to participate in the assessment in a few days. Who are you calling watchdogs? Zhang Pengji stood in front of Feng Jin and looked at the person who spoke. Some of the other students were watching, and some wanted to go forward to help, but they did not bring any weapons. Just by comparing their size, how could they be a match for the strong men who were holding knives? Feng Jin was the unluckiest. Not only did he hurt his arm, but he was also slapped in the face. The rest of them had messy clothes and occasional scratches. TSK, he's scolding the dog that stole his sister-in-law. It was as if Zhang Pengji had eaten gunpowder. She was in a bad mood. Now that someone was asking for a beating in front of her, she naturally rebuked him without holding back. Don't people in the north borderline have different levels? Apart from the royal family, everyone else was second-class trash. Calling you watchdogs is a compliment to show the friendship between our two countries. Feng Jin had never seen such a shrewish Jiang Pengji. He was so shocked that he forgot about the pain. Those rough men were also choked by Jiang Pengji's scolding. The leader looked fierce, but he was not good with words. They felt that those scholars were weak and only knew how to mutter. Their legs added together were not even as thick as one of their arms. It was a sensitive period. Even if they humiliated these people, the Dongqing royal family would not do anything to them. Who did you say had an affair with sister-in-law? A trace of panic flashed across the leader's face. He took a step forward with his knife and instantly closed the distance between him and Jiang Pengji. He threatened her fiercely. Jiang Pengji laughed and grinned, showing her white teeth. You also stole your father's concubine. Feng Jin knew that Jiang Pengji would not speak without a reason. What she said was probably true. Otherwise, the strong man would not have reacted so fiercely. Suddenly, he could not help but think of the night in the bandits' village, when Jiang Pengji exposed his background. Why, you witch dog, hurt you? Jiang Pengji did not care about the strong men in front of her at all. If they were not happy, she would fight. She would not lose in an argument, let alone in a fight. Lanting, Dongqing is a land of etiquette. Feng Jin secretly smiled bitterly. Oh yes, the one who hit me was the one with the green headscarf. He felt that Jiang Pengji's words were very cool, but he also had to pay attention to the influence between the two countries. However, his friend was willing to stand up for him, so he could not refuse her kindness. Speak the human language to people because people can understand the human language. Speak the dog language to dogs because dogs can't understand the human language. Look, if you speak the human language to them, they can't understand. But if I speak to them like that, can't they understand? Jiang Pengji snorted. When dealing with foreign friends, you should change accordingly and actively eliminate the language barrier. That is the correct way of diplomacy. Everyone knew that Jiang Pengji was bullshitting, but some people felt that they had been brainwashed. This kind of fallacious reasoning seemed to be quite interesting. The strong men from the northern borderline were there to pick a fight. Originally, they were quite happy to bully the weak scholars, but when they met Jiang Pengji, who was so eloquent, they suddenly became angry. If they could not win in an argument, then they would fight. Anyway, it would be fine as long as no one died. Dongqing had been emphasizing culture and restraining martial arts for many years. The men at the border of the northern borderline were considered to be unyielding men, but after they entered Dongqing, all the men they saw were sissies with flowers in their hair and powder in their hair. Occasionally, there were a few normal men, but they did not use their limbs. They could pat their chests and say that the white chickens in the courtyard were not enough for them to chop, let alone the short man in front of them. As it turned out, they seemed to have met a fake sissy, but a real Hercules. Bang! Jiang Pengji's body was thin and small, so she had the advantage of dexterity. Her strength and appearance had nothing to do with each other. They thought they could take her down with a raise of their hands, but they did not expect her to be more slippery than a loach. She snatched the blade from one of the men's hands with her bare hands and pinched the man's wrist with 2 fingers. Not only did she force the man to let go of the blade, but at the same time, she turned around and got close to the man's chest. She pulled the man's body forward, and with her other elbow, she struck the man's Adam's apple. In a flash, she caught the handle of the blade that the man had let go of. At the same time, she twisted her body and kneed the man. Those with sensitive ears could even hear the sound of a sack bursting and liquid splattering. Everyone was speechless. Wait, that position. Feng Jin was so scared that he took a step back. His legs were faintly trembling. Jiang Pengji used the strong man's body as a shield to block the knife that was aimed at her back. She turned her wrist and the blade turned in another direction. It was as if she had eyes on the back of her head. The blade moved agilely in front of the ambusher's eyes. Suddenly, blood splattered, and it hurt people's eyes. That was not all. After she dropped the shield, her fingers became claws and strangled the man's throat. She pulled him down and threw him to the ground. Not only did his face hit the ground, but the force of Jiang Pengji's fall made his face a bloody mess. It was clearly a dozen strong men ganging up on one person, but looking at the situation on the battlefield, it looked like Jiang Pengji ganging up on a group of people. Feng Jin knew that Jiang Pengji could fight, but he did not know that she could fight to this extent. Those strong men were well-trained warriors of the northern borderline. They were few in number, but on the battlefield, They were like a human head harvester. Tell me which dog's paw hurt Huayu. Chapter 276. Zhang Pengji basically showed no mercy. Although they were still alive, they were basically crippled. According to the customs of the 3 tribes of the northern borderline, the fate of these handicapped people was to be abandoned and thrown into the wilderness to fight for their lives with wild beasts. In the northern border where resources were scarce and the environment was harsh, this was a fate worse than death. Not answering? Fine, I'll chop off both arms. After saying that, the broadsword in her hand was already thirsty. At this moment, the sound of armor clashing and a series of heavy footsteps came from outside the courtyard. Wait! Zhang Pengji sneered in her heart. She would lose face if he told her to slow down. In the end, he was a step too late. He raised his hand and the blade fell. A bloody arm was chopped off. Zhang Pengji raised her head and looked out of the courtyard coldly. 2 rows of armored soldiers from the northern borderline ran in, all carrying shiny weapons in their hands. Each of them was murderous, and the aura around them was like that of a dormant ferocious beast. Their imposing manner gave people a very oppressive feeling. You actually... A man dressed in northern borderline attire came out of the crowd. Looking at the northern borderline warriors lying on the ground, his face darkened. I used my own abilities to kill people. Why should I stop? Zhang Pengji removed her foot from his face and kicked him away. She stared at him coldly. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for speaking too slowly. How can you blame me for acting too quickly? She struck first, not giving the other party a chance to question her. This is Dongqing, not the barbaric and uncivilized northern borderline. If you don't want to abide by the rules, get lost. Since you want to negotiate with the royal family through marriage, please show your sincerity. Zhang Pengji had beaten him up and chopped off his arm in front of him. The situation was already beyond redemption. At the end of the day, they were standing up for him. How could Feng Jin drag them down at this time? He panted and endured the severe pain in his arm. With a pale face he said, seriously injuring the son of an important minister and humiliating the young students of Dongqing, is this the sincerity of your court in the peace talks? Today's matter cannot end so easily. Your northern borderline must give us an explanation. If these people were fooling around with ordinary people or poor disciples, Dongqing would have to swallow it no matter how unhappy they were. After all, they had to focus on the big picture. But what was the result? Among the crowd, Feng Jin was the most severely injured. He was the second legitimate son of the Feng family, one of the 4 noble families in Dongqing, and the son of Feng Ren, the head of the secretariat. If the bruises on his face were not applied with good ointment, it would probably take at least 10 days to half a month to disappear. Apart from that, his right arm was also cut by a knife. Blood kept flowing out. The injury to his right arm meant that he could not write, which would affect the upcoming assessment. In order to be in the limelight during the assessment, which student didn't put in great effort? If Feng Jin missed this assessment, all his previous efforts would be in vain. Even the plans he had made early in the morning would be disrupted. Who would compensate for such a huge loss? Feng Jin had suffered so much. Was he willing to be beaten up for nothing? Would Feng Ren let it go? Would the Feng clan let this go? For a prestigious landowning household that had existed for more than 1,000 years, they could lose their lives, but they could not afford to lose their face. Seeing that Zhang Pengji and Feng Jin were echoing each other with an arrogant attitude, the face of the man from the northern borderline who led the troops over also stiffened. Zhang Pengji added fuel to the fire and took the opportunity to add another sentence. If you have no intention of negotiating, you should make it clear as soon as possible. Today, you deliberately humiliated the son of an important official in the court. This matter must be reported to the officials. Instead of glaring at me here, why don't you go back and ask your master how to settle this matter? The other party was irritated by Zhang Pengji, and a lot of anger had accumulated in his stomach. A few warriors from the northern borderline were looking for trouble. Originally, they were secretly instructed by someone. Even if they hurt someone, they were not afraid. When the time came, someone would naturally come out to support them. Dongqing was used to being weak. Even if it was for the sake of the overall situation, they had to swallow the loss this time. However, they never expected that the warriors from the northern borderline who came to look for trouble would not only bully others but be pressed to the ground and trampled on. The man from the northern borderline was the general of the northern borderline who escorted the princess. He had some status and prestige among the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. He should have led his troops over arrogantly with the intention of denouncing them, but now he was put in a difficult position by a teenager. Who do you think you are? You hurt the warriors of the northern borderline. You should pay the price. Arrest them all. The man from the northern borderline calmed himself down and planned to arrest them first so that there would be no evidence. As long as they insisted that they were the ones who suffered losses, according to the Dongqing royal family's usual weak style, the northern borderline would not suffer losses. So what if he was the son of an important minister in the court? As long as he did not kick an iron plate, the royal family of Dongqing would not dare to offend him when the marriage was already set in stone. Therefore, the man from the northern borderline looked at Jiang Pengji and Feng Jin with a hint of murderous intent. It turned out that they did not kick an iron plate, but an iron wall. Wu Liba, who did you say you wanted to arrest? At that moment, Lu Shi's voice came from the crowd. The man from the northern borderline did not expect someone to be able to recognize his identity. He could not help but look in the direction of the voice. My son is right. This is Dongqing, not your northern borderline. If you don't want to come here without returning, then you better tuck your tail between your legs and behave. Otherwise, no matter how the other old farts try to protect you, I, Lu Zhongqing, will not let you walk out of the city gates of Shangjing. Feng Ren, who was a step behind, looked at his disheveled son with a gloomy face. He then looked at the arrogant people from the northern borderline and sneered coldly in his heart. He did not open his mouth to argue with the envoys from the northern borderline. Instead, he chose to ignore them and ordered someone to bring a medical officer over. Bandage your wounds. Later, you will enter the palace with me to meet the emperor. Feng Jin's face was pale and he nodded. Wu Liba was in a difficult position. His face turned the color of a pig's liver. He had originally come to embarrass others, but now he was humiliated instead. He was even thrown to the ground and stepped on twice by the other party. Next time, bring some brains with you when you go out. If you want to take others down a notch, you should first see if the other party is a cat or a tiger. Jiang Pengji stepped forward and clicked her tongue. She ignored his embarrassed expression. It's good that Hua Yu's arm is fine. If anything happens to it and causes it to be difficult to hold a pen in the future, Wu Liba, I don't want your lowly life as compensation. Be smart and break your arms as an apology. Wu Liba's face completely turned into ashes. He looked at Jiang Pengji with a murderous look. If it was anyone else, they would have been scared out of their wits, but she was Jiang Pengji. To put it bluntly, the number of people she had killed was more than the amount of rice he had eaten. This depends on whether the emperor of Dongqing agrees to it or not. After he finished speaking, Wu Liba left with his men. He did not care about the warriors from the northern borderline who were half dead on the ground. Looking at their backs as they left, Jiang Pengji suddenly slashed at the rockery at the side. Lu Shi sighed. Don't judge Wu Liba by his appearance as a brainless boar. In reality, he is a rare wise general in the northern borderline. Chapter 277. Jiang Pengji had long foreseen the outcome of Nanqing's defeat, but she did not expect that the news of them asking for reinforcements had only just reached Dongqing. Coincidentally, they bumped into the marriage team of the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. Dongqing would be in trouble. Although Dongqing and Nanqing had conflicts, they were still considered part of Great Xia, while the 3 tribes of the north borderline and the 4 tribes of Nanman were considered outsiders. In layman's terms, Dongqing and Nanqing were 2 sons of the same father. Even if they were separated, their bones were still connected. However, the 3 tribes of the north borderline and the 4 tribes of Nanman were foreign enemies who coveted their family property. In order to protect the family property of their ancestors, the 2 countries had to temporarily put aside their grudges and join forces. If Nanqing was really defeated by the iron cavalry of the 4 factions of Nanman, Dongqing would face the danger of being attacked from both sides by the 3 tribes of the northern borderline and the 4 factions of Nanman. The annihilation of the country was just around the corner. Therefore, Dongqing had no choice but to lend Nanqing troops to Dongqing. Both parties were interdependent. However, if they borrowed troops, it would definitely affect the military strength of Dongqing's border defense. The military strength used to resist the northern borderline would also be affected. The three tribes of the northern borderline had been at war with Dongqing for many years. They had always won more than they lost. Dongqing was courting death by emphasizing culture and restraining military force. It was foreseeable that after Nanxing came to borrow troops, Dongqing's military strength in the northern borderline would be thinned. It was no wonder that the envoy from the northern borderline was so fearless. Lu Shi sighed and said, "The three tribes of the northern borderline have been coveting Dongqing for a long time. I only hope that you are clear-headed and don't let the wolf into the house. Marriage is not a permanent solution, but it seems that it is too late." Feng Ren looked at his son with pity. His heart ached when he saw his son's pale face. He sneered coldly when he heard Lu Shi's sigh. He despised the man sitting on the throne. Although Feng Ren knew that he would not get any justice in the palace this time, he still wanted to let the emperor know that the Feng family was not a pushover. Feng Ren cupped his hands and apologized to Lu Shi. Then he left with his son, whose wound had just been treated. His face was as cold as ice. After experiencing such a thing, many people no longer had the leisure to soak in the spring. Suddenly, someone patted Jiang Pengji's shoulder. "I didn't expect you to be so skilled in martial arts." It made one want to shout out in satisfaction. "I don't like those bastards either. It's just that I can't beat them up like you." It is said that the warriors of the northern borderline are fearless of death, but from what I see now, it seems that they are not as powerful as you. She resisted the urge to subdue him and turned her head calmly. It turned out to be the young man who had tried to get close to her before. Jiang Pengji warned him expressionlessly, for the sake of the words, "grandson of AB*TCH. I don't like people patting my shoulder from behind. If you're a stranger, I'm afraid you won't be able to keep your arm." The other party was stunned, and he withdrew his hand as if he had been electrocuted. "I didn't expect you to be so vicious at such a young age." As they were talking, the group returned to the Rose Courtyard Sky Room 1. Separated by a corridor, Jiang Pengji noticed a tall and slender figure in white standing in the corridor. The man's ink-black hair draped over his shoulders, faintly revealing his pale, tightly pursed lips and a slight chin. Perhaps he heard the footsteps, but he turned around slightly. His indifferent gaze swept around and fixed on Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji had fought with someone, so her clothes were inevitably stained with blood. If she didn't look relaxed, people who didn't know would think that the blood was hers. However, Wei Ci was very clear that this woman was not the one who was at a disadvantage. The blood could only belong to someone else. Thinking of this, Wei Ci moved his gaze away calmly and asked the young man who was familiar with Jiang Pengji. "Shaoyin, what's going on?" A group of boorish men who claimed to be envoys from the northern borderline were causing trouble in front. A servant from the Feng residence came to Lanting for help. Out of curiosity, I followed them to take a look. I didn't expect those people from the northern borderline to be so arrogant. They bully Dongqing. How hateful. The young man's voice was filled with resentment, but he immediately resumed his playfulness. "Zixiao, let me tell you, Master really took in a good student. She's really good at fighting." "A servant from the Feng residence?" Wei Ci frowned and glanced at Jiang Pengji, who looked normal. Wei Ci had always known that she was good at fighting. Not to mention a few warriors from the northern borderline, if she had a spear, she could easily kill her way in and out of the enemy's formation more than 10 times. She could take the head of the enemy's general as easily as taking something out of her pocket. But he sighed slightly in his heart. It was indeed different. He rarely saw this person show an expression other than indifference. If it was in the past, thinking of this, Wei Ci firmly suppressed the thoughts in his heart and calmed his mind. Facing this woman, he needed to be 120% vigilant. Otherwise, if he was not careful, he would have nowhere to hide in front of her. He had experienced this a long time ago. Jiang Pengji explained, "Feng Jin is my good friend. He was bullied, so I naturally had to go over and support him. What's more, those boorish men from the northern borderline are really annoying. I gave them a light punishment, or else I would have nowhere to vent my anger." What a joke. Beating her partner was the same as beating her. Of course, she had to get back at them. You didn't just give them a light punishment just now. You made them lose their courage. To deal with the ambitious foreign tribes from the northern borderline, you should use such a forceful method. If you talk about propriety, righteousness, integrity, and trust with them, they will only think that you are afraid of them. Xueqi placed both hands on Jiang Pengji's shoulders. With an expression of experience, he said warmly, "In the future, when we go to Langyi Academy, I will protect you." Wei Ci silently glanced at Lu Zheng's hands. His eyes gradually darkened. "I said, don't pat my shoulder from behind." Jiang Pengji repeated. "My name is Lu Zheng. Master gave me the courtesy name Xueqi. Look, we know each other now. We are not considered strangers, right?" Jiang Pengji rolled her eyes and said, "Up to you. If I dislocate your arm next time, don't ask me to take responsibility." After saying that, Jiang Pengji skillfully shook her shoulders and slid out like a mudfish. Lu Zheng found that the shoulder under his palm had become extremely soft and smooth. Before he could subconsciously grab it, she had already left his palm. He could only stare at his hands in a daze. Then he looked at Jiang Pengji's back and sighed. "You really have good skills." Wei Ci looked at him coldly. His eyelids slightly narrowed as he said, "When martial arts practitioners reach a certain level, they will be highly vigilant of their surroundings. If an unfamiliar aura tries to approach them, it is extremely easy for them to unconsciously capture it. Xueqi, be more careful." Lu Zheng was startled. He suddenly realized that Wei Ci was saying that he was stupid. "Zixiao, why do you also read such indecent novels from the streets?" No matter how he looked at it, his words sounded like the standard of a wandering master in a novel from the streets. "If you don't believe me, try approaching her when she's taking a nap. But if her arm is crippled, I won't take responsibility." Wei Ci knew that it was not a rumor from the streets. It was true. "Hey, Wei Zixiao, you never have good intentions. I won't be fooled." Chapter 278. After returning to the hot spring room, Wei Ci asked the other students in detail to understand the whole story. He sighed and said, "Feng Huayu's fortune never comes in pairs, and misfortune never comes alone. He suffered for someone else for nothing. But it's fortunate that this is the case. Otherwise, tonight's incident would be difficult to resolve. Dongqing is already in a precarious situation. It can't withstand such a shock." Jiang Pengji listened at the side. She raised her eyebrows slightly and asked, "What do you mean?" Wei Ci didn't want to answer. After all, he had some indescribable resistance to this person. He subconsciously didn't want to have too much contact with her. But after a slight hesitation, Wei Ci recalled what Jiang Pengji whispered in his ear when she imprisoned his hands. He didn't want her to pay special attention to him. He could only let go of the grudge in his heart and truly treat her as a very ordinary person. Thus, Wei Ci answered calmly, "If I'm not wrong, these warriors from the northern borderline are planning to cause trouble for the residents of the Count of Zhenbei." Lu Zheng, who was at the side, suddenly reacted. Yes, among the group of people just now, there was indeed a Lang Jun from the residence of the Count of Zhenbei. The descendants of the Count of Zhenbei have contributed a lot to Dongqing. They shed blood and shed blood. They were originally flourishing, but in order to guard the northern borderline, some of them died in battle, some died of illness. There aren't many seedlings left. Among the Langjuns today, the reclusive crown prince of Zhenbei was also present. The descendants of the Count of Zhenbei guarded the northern borderline and took the lives of many northern borderline warriors. Most of the descendants of the Count of Zhenbei died on the battlefield at the hands of the generals of the northern borderline. The two sides have long formed a deep hatred. It's not surprising that they have a conflict when they meet. The descendants of the Count of Zhenbei are few and far between, but they still hold a large number of troops. The emperor has been afraid of them for a long time and sees them as a thorn in his side. If anything happens to the crown prince, I'm afraid the three tribes of the northern borderline would probably wake up laughing even in their dreams. The emperor sitting high on the dragon throne might be angry on the surface, but he must be very happy in secret. I heard you say that there's a person called Wu Liba among the group of people causing trouble. He's one of the few wise generals in the three tribes of the northern borderline. He looks stupid and reckless, but he's actually very meticulous. Now that they were in the territory of Dongqing, no matter how arrogant they would not dare to act so recklessly. However, if the target is the crown prince of the residence of Zhenbei Marquis, the emperor will be furious on the surface, but will secretly protect Wu Liba and his group. By doing so, he could not only satisfy the emperor's wishes, but he could also sow discord between the residents of Northern Marquis and the emperor, causing the two to completely turn against each other. The military power in the hands of the Count of Zhenbei was too great. How could the emperor not know the ambition of the three tribes of the northern borderline? However, he was even more afraid that the residents of Count Zhenbei would be overshadowed by their achievements. Lu Zhang felt a chill down his spine. Even though he had talked about the world situation with his classmates, he had never been as cold as he was now. The other point is also the reason why the three clans of the northern borderline are the most fearless. Nanqing's army was defeated like a landslide. Dongqing was bound to send reinforcements. At that time, the border of the northern borderline would be in danger. Now, I'm afraid the emperor is looking forward to the marriage even more. He hopes to temporarily stabilize the three tribes of the northern borderline by marriage. But he doesn't know that the northern borderline has been coveting Dongqing for many years. Why would they care about a weak marriage relationship? Zhang Pengji snorted coldly. What you mean by this is that the emperor may now favor the three tribes of the northern borderline and work hard to stabilize them with all kinds of generous conditions. It's not that it's possible, it's that they will definitely do so. Wei Ci sighed softly. He also had feelings for the royal family of Dongqing, but he couldn't stand the fact that they were too good at courting death. The more disappointed he was with the royal family of Dongqing, the more he missed the person who made him suffer for half of his life. Putting aside how shocking it was for a woman to ascend to the throne, at the very least, she was able to stabilize the country, prevent the people from being humiliated, prevent chaos in the court, and prevent the people from being anxious and fearful. Thinking of this, the pain he had suffered seemed to be nothing. The power of the emperor is not bestowed by the deities of heaven and earth. It comes from the people and the people of the world. Therefore, the emperor is light, but the people are heavy. As an emperor, if he destroys his reputation through marriage, struggles to survive by ceding land, exploits the people through tribute, and humiliates the country through reparations, how can he have the face to sit on the throne? The emperor should guard the gates of the country, and the emperor should die for the country. Now that he could do it all over again, he hoped that he could truly assist her for once, as a strategist, and not as someone that even he despised. Zhang Pengji felt a little depressed. She snorted. Oh, the group of people from the northern borderline have achieved their goal of testing the bottom line by creating trouble. Wu Liba's action seemed arrogant, but upon careful thought, there were many conspiracies and calculations involved. The emperor's final judgment was biased towards the northern borderline. Wu Liba's goal of testing the waters had been achieved, and he would be more fearless in the future. But Lu Langjun, you don't have to worry. As long as your father is still around, the emperor won't touch you easily. When he said this, Wei Ci's expression was a little strange and conflicted, but he quickly restrained it. How could he not be conflicted? Lu Shi had clearly been personally. TSK, how could he become the county chief of Hu County? If Lu Shi had the ability, he wouldn't have ended up like that. Wei Ci didn't know what went wrong, but he didn't intend to investigate further because there was no need. He was very clear that people would change. From the moment things changed, everything that he knew would be useless. The right path was to be down to earth. Zhang Pengji was not happy about what Wei Ci said. Only the weak needed to be protected by the strong. She was safe because of Lu Shi, which meant that she was not strong enough. Thinking of this, a strange light flashed in her eyes. An impulse arose in her heart, but she forcefully suppressed it in the end. Zhang Pengji smiled coldly and said meaningfully, "Oh, it's best if he doesn't touch me." If he dared to touch her, he would make the emperor regret crawling out of his mother's womb. Wei Ci was silent. Seeing Zhang Pengji reveal an expression that he was familiar with, he was shocked to find that his hands were secretly sweating. Wei Ci forced himself to calm down. Just as he was about to stand up and leave, Zhang Pengji suddenly asked him, "Is Zixiao very clear about the situation in the court?" He was about to say that he knew a little, but the ignorant Lu Zhang directly exposed him. "Lanting, you don't know about this. Come, let me tell you. Zixiao's policy and political commentaries have always been very exciting. He has a profound analysis of the world situation and always has his own views. Sitting at home, he has long been aware of the situation in the outside world. Even my master said that he is not inferior to Premier Zhang of the previous dynasty. It's a pity that he is stubborn. I don't know what's bothering him, but he still refuses to accept my master as his disciple." Lu Zhang had placed Wei Ci on a pedestal and praised him with all his might, but in the end he said, Fortunately, half a year ago, he went down the mountain and hit his head. He finally knocked the water out of his head and agreed to be my master's disciple. Zhang Pengji, Wei Ci. I'll say it again, Lu Xiaoyin. You say, brain, head, enter, water, yes. Suddenly, Lu Zheng rubbed his arms. He was clearly in the hot spring, but his back felt a little chilly. Xiaoyin, I suddenly feel a little itchy. Come, let's have a game. Without any explanation, Wei Ci pulled the very unwilling Lu Zheng away. Zhang Pengji looked at the bright moon hanging in the sky and suddenly curled her lips. She lowered her head to look at the card between her fingers. Chapter 279. Feng Ran and his son sat in the speeding carriage. The sound of the wheels was mixed with the bustling noise in the carriage, but it couldn't break the strange silence between the two of them. After a long time, Feng Ran sighed and said calmly, "Does your hand still hurt?" Feng Jin sat upright. His face was abnormally pale, and his lips were slightly blue. The wound on his right arm had been bandaged by the medical officer, but the blood had soaked through most of his sleeves and arms. It hadn't dried up yet, and the strong smell filled the entire carriage. He looked rather pathetic. "It doesn't hurt that much anymore." Feng Jin lowered his eyes and answered. He asked hesitantly, "Father the Emperor," Feng Ren interrupted him and said, "I'm afraid the Emperor is determined to unite with the 3 tribes of the northern borderline by marriage to stabilize the war situation at the border. Even a child wouldn't bother to use such a naive scheme, but the Emperor can't help him after all." Feng Jin didn't miss a word that his father said. The more he listened, the more nervous he became, as if a small drum was beating intensely in his heart. Did his father mean that he was ready to give up the hopeless Dongqing royal family? "You were a little reckless today. If it weren't for Lu Zhongqing's strong martial arts, you wouldn't have just injured your arm." Feng Ren's voice was a little more pitiful and resentful. After all, it was his son who was injured, and the pain was in his father's heart. Feng Jin lowered his eyes and silently listened to Feng Ren's rebuke. He didn't like to stand out, but today he had a conflict with the warriors of the northern borderline and was even injured by them. Naturally, he had his reasons. If he went forward, he would at most be injured, but if the warriors of the northern borderline pointed their spears at the crown prince of the Count of Zhenbei, someone might die. Everyone knew that there were hungry wolves in Dongqing. The Count of Zhenbei was the last stronghold of Dongqing in the north. If something happened to the crown prince of the Count of Zhenbei, who knew what those people would do? How arrogant would the 3 tribes of the northern borderline be? Maybe it was because of the family tradition. Feng Jin and Feng Ren usually didn't care who was the emperor. However, Feng Jin was still young and hot-blooded. He could not watch what happened today become the fuse for the downfall of the Count of Zhenbei. When the time came, the 3 tribes of the northern borderline would no longer be able to stop them. They would be able to send their troops south and march straight into the hinterland of Dongqing, causing the people to be plunged into misery and suffering. Therefore, Feng Jin stopped the crown prince of Count Zhenbei, and went forward to face the provocation of those warriors from the northern borderline. He was defeated and was injured. If he hadn't been quick-witted and asked Zhang Pengji for help, it would have been more than just an arm injury. Thinking of Zhang Pengji, Feng Jin's expression softened a little and he felt a little more warm. At this moment, he somewhat understood what it felt like for a ranger in a common story to be willing to risk his life for the sake of his brother. Feng Ren changed his tone and said somewhat angrily, "However, have you ever thought about what would happen if that brat's martial arts skills aren't good enough and he gets implicated because of you?" Feng Jin was speechless. He was about to say that Zhang Pengji's martial arts skills were excellent, but Feng Ren did not give him a chance to speak. "Forget it. I owe Lu Zhongqing a favor this time. I'll find a chance to repay him in the future." For a moment, the carriage returned to silence. Feng Ren closed his eyes and could not help but start to think about what to do next. The current royal family of Dongqing was like mud that couldn't be helped. In order to take back the power in the hands of the aristocratic families, that man made even more foolish moves. He secretly supported the influence of his relatives and condoned the power of the eunuchs. He tried to muddy the waters so that he could fish in troubled waters and reap the benefits. What was the result? The struggle between the aristocratic families, the collective group of eunuchs, and the increasingly powerful influence of the relatives became more and more intense. The current emperor had great ambitions, but he did not have the means to control his subordinates. It was originally just a problem of the aristocratic family's power, but now it had become a hidden danger that affected the entire court and the whole of Dongqing. The Feng family had been passed down for more than 1,000 years. What kind of storms and waves had they not seen? Dongqing was just like a big ship that was leaking and in danger of sinking at any time. Now, it was time to retreat bravely and temporarily lay dormant to wait for the general trend of the world. But after a while, Feng Ren already had a plan in his mind. Feng Jin, who was beside him, was still worried. The carriage went straight to Shangyang Palace. The towering palace was like a giant beast lying on the ground. Although it was late at night, the palace lights were not extinguished. If one looked down from above, the brightly lit Shangyang Palace was like a brilliant pearl embedded on the ground. The emperor wanted to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Every day, he would play with the palace maids and concubines. He was extremely luxurious. Occasionally, when he wanted to have an affair, he would either visit the officials' homes incognito, humiliate the officials' wives, or kidnap women and lock them in the summer palace. The officials in Shangjing were angry but dared not say anything. In the early years, Feng Ren still had expectations for the emperor. He dared to speak and be angry, but naturally, he was not liked by the emperor. If he was not the leader of the Feng family and the emperor did not dare to touch him, he would have lost his official position and his family would have suffered. Minister of the Secretariat, what's wrong with you today? At this time, His Majesty has already gone to bed. Feng Ren smiled coldly. His eyes seemed to be penetrating with cold knives. His tough attitude was completely different from his usual good guy image. Feng Ren waved his sleeves angrily. Gone to bed early? Assistant Liu, you can talk to a 3-year-old kid, but it's not enough to deal with me. You and I know what kind of person His Majesty is. If I don't see His Majesty today, I won't leave. Decadent sounds had already come out of the palace, and the air was filled with an extremely extravagant smell. Did he tell him that the emperor had already gone to bed? Did he really think that he, Feng Xianda, was a 3-year-old kid? Assistant Liu had lost his virginity since he was a child. His voice was extremely shrill, and his appearance was neither male nor female. However, he could climb to the position of Assistant Liu in the Shuraba of Shangyang Palace and become a close eunuch trusted by the emperor. He was naturally good at observing people. He smiled awkwardly. Minister of the Secretariat entered the palace late at night. Logically speaking, I should report as soon as possible. However, His Majesty has been working hard for the affairs of the northern borderline recently, and he often gets angry. It's also very difficult for me. Why don't Minister of the Secretariat secretly tell me that if the matter you entered the palace to report is really important, I'll report it for you even at the risk of being punished by His Majesty. Normally, Feng Ren would definitely be so angry that he would leave when Assistant Liu put him in such a difficult position. He didn't want to argue with a eunuch. But today, he answered with a cold smile. Resign. Assistant Liu's face changed dramatically. He said, What happened? How did you make Minister of the Secretariat so angry? Resignation is not a trivial matter. Once it's said, it's hard to take it back. Why did you? Feng Ren said with a cold face. It seems that His Majesty is really asleep. I won't disturb him. I'll write to His Majesty tomorrow. Assistant Liu didn't dare to stop him. He quickly said that he would go in and report. No matter how stupid he was, he knew that Feng Ren's resignation at this time was tantamount to adding fuel to the fire. Feng Jin secretly looked at the luxurious and exquisite Shangyang Palace, and then looked at the arrogant Assistant Liu. A chill spread in his heart. Feng Ren said coldly with a fake smile, Then I'll have to trouble Assistant Liu. Chapter 280. Feng Ren came out of the palace with a cold expression. Why you let's go. Feng Jin secretly glanced at his father, and then listened to the sounds of things being smashed and the terrified screams of the palace maids. After hesitating for a while, he decisively followed his father's footsteps. He was extremely disappointed in the emperor and had completely given up. As Feng Ren expected, the emperor only rewarded Feng Jin with a large amount of money and medicinal herbs. He didn't mention how to deal with the messengers from the northern borderline. He didn't even try to hide the fact that he was defending the people from the northern borderline. Even though Feng Ren threatened him with resignation, the other party was determined and even secretly felt a little happy. Although Feng Ren was the head of the Secretariat, He was still an official. No matter how insignificant he was still an official. If he took the initiative to resign, the emperor could install his confidant and gradually increase his voice in the court. He thought of Secretary Lu's reaction. When he heard that Feng Ren intended to resign, he hurriedly went to report, but the emperor was overjoyed. When he put the two reactions together, Feng Ren almost laughed. An emperor's foresight was not as far-sighted as a eunuch. If the Feng family continued to follow such an emperor, they would be doomed. It was a good strategy to escape as soon as possible. When it came to chess skills, even Ten Lu Zhang could not beat Wei Ci, who was full of schemes. I don't want to play chess with you anymore. Every time I play, I feel like I'm punching cotton. I feel very aggrieved. Lu Zhang saw that he had lost the upper hand on the chessboard, so he quickly admitted defeat. It would be self-torture to continue playing chess. He wanted to find Jiang Pengji for comfort, but when he turned around, he found that she had disappeared. Zixiao, did you see where Lanting went? Lu Zhang asked casually. Wei Ci said, he left a quarter of an hour ago. I guess he went to bed. Lu Zhang nodded and immediately reacted. He gritted his teeth and wanted to strangle the person in front of him. You were playing chess with me 15 minutes ago, and now you have the time to pay attention to others. Wei Ci was speechless. Jiang Pengji was watching them play, but she knew that Lu Zhang would lose when she saw the chess. She suddenly lost the mood to continue watching. She did not obediently go to bed like Wei Ci had told her to. Instead, she changed into a set of light clothes and went to drink wine with Lu Shi. Yes, drinking with prostitutes, and bringing Lu Shi along. Lu Shi, what can I do? I'm desperate too. Lu Shi didn't even dare to touch his daughter's glass of wine as he watched her drink like it was water. What's bothering you? He asked. Jiang Pengji dismissed her attendants and asked Lu Shi, Father, did you mean it when you said you wanted to marry my sister to Wuma Jun? Lu Shi furrowed his brows and replied, Of course it's true. As your father, I've also said that you don't need to settle the grudges of the previous generation. In that case, I have a presumptuous request. Jiang Pengji's eyes lit up, and there seemed to be a glimmer of light in them. What? Jiang Pengji said, I want to find a girl with outstanding looks to be my sister's dowry. I want her to marry Wuma Jun. Nanxing was already in chaos. The 4 factions of Nanman had directed their troops towards Nanqing's capital city. Out of the 5 countries in the world, one was about to perish. She could not wait any longer. Lu Shi's current body would only be 13 years old in a few months. In a few years, no one knew what the situation would be like in the world. Jiang Pengji planned to start planning now, instead of waiting until then to passively enter the game. Lu Shi was a little dumbfounded. He understood that his daughter was probably going to use a honey trap to make the already chaotic situation even worse. At the same time, she would secretly gain some benefits. A honey trap and pillow talk could be considered a good idea, but Wuma Jun was only an unfavored prince on the surface. Jiang Pengji only sneered coldly at this. Does the Dongqing royal family still have such a thing as moral integrity? They can humiliate their officials' wives, kill their brothers and snatch their sisters-in-law, and kill their parents. How can they lack a concubine who snatches their sons? Rather than directly sending the beauty to him, it's better to let him snatch her himself. That way it won't arouse suspicion. Also, try to make this girl look similar to Wuma Jun's mother, Wang Shi. Jiang Pengji tapped her fingers on the tea table and added. Lu Shi's hands trembled when he heard that. The teacup that he was holding suddenly fell on the table, spilling tea all over the table. His face became extremely ugly. After Jiang Pengji saw it, she revealed an expression that said, I knew it. What you said is not difficult. I'll send someone to look for her. Lu Shi tried hard to maintain a calm expression. He was afraid that he would reveal any unnecessary emotions. Jiang Pengji acted as if she did not see Lu Shi's loss of composure. She continued to leisurely drink her wine with a faint smile on her lips. Lu Shi, who was beside her, was anxious and fearful. As time went by, the psychological pressure that his daughter put on him increased. Spending the night in the red light district, enjoying a night of singing and dancing, it was indescribably carefree. When the sun hung high in the sky the next day, Jiang Pengji returned to the hot spring house with the smell of alcohol. Where the hell did you come from? Lu Zhang saw her and was about to greet her, but he was scared away by the various colors of rouge on her body. The rouge smelled good, but it could not withstand the strong smell of alcohol. The combination of the two was a kind of olfactory torture for people who were used to smelling all kinds of incense. Chongqing Alley. That's not a hell of a place. Jiang Pengji soaked her face with a wet towel. She looked much more sober. Lu Zheng was speechless. Even though it was his first time in Shangjing and his first time soaking in the hot spring, he knew what kind of place Chongqing Alley was. It was a gentle place for men and a red light district where all kinds of beauties gathered. The teenager in front of him was not even fully grown yet, right? The wine there is delicious and the music is not bad. If you like it, I'll bring you there later. Lu Zhang quickly agreed to Jiang Pengji's invitation. How can I accept that? But I heard that there are many talented women in Chongqing Alley who are full of knowledge. Many young and talented men will always have a poetry competition in order to win a beauty's smile. I really want to see it. Wei Ci was speechless. He glanced at Lu Zhang, who was slightly eager to try, and then looked at Jiang Pengji. He snorted coldly. Seeing Wei Ci walk past them, Lu Zhang said with a bitter face, Zixiao has never liked to be close to women. He looks down on that kind of place. He heard our conversation just now. I hope he won't say anything in front of Master. He won't say anything, Jiang Pengji said with certainty. Lu Zhang asked, How do you know? Jiang Pengji found it funny and answered, Intuition. Wei Ci did not say anything, but Jiang Pengji and Lu Zhang could not go to Chongqing Alley because Master Yuanjing left Jishan with his students in the afternoon. Seeing that, Lu Shi felt that soaking in the hot spring was boring, so he took Jiang Pengji and hitched a ride with them. They went down the mountain together. When they arrived at the city gate, they were still talking and laughing when a piece of shocking news came. Chapter 281. Wait, why did something happen to the crown prince of the Count of Zhenbei? Jiang Pengji sat in the carriage and watched the bullet screen in boredom to kill time. Occasionally, she chatted with the audience. Her sensitive ears heard the whispers of passers-by outside the carriage. She suddenly perked up and hurriedly lifted the curtain of the carriage, jumping out to inquire. This series of actions almost scared the people in the carriage and the coachman. The latter hurriedly pulled the reins and stopped the carriage. Lanting, how can you be so reckless? What if you accidentally hurt yourself? Lu Shi was so frightened by Jiang Pengji's action of jumping out of the carriage. When he came back to his senses, he found that his back was drenched in cold sweat. Jiang Pengji turned her head and said that she was fine. At the same time, she grabbed the commoner who was gossiping just now and repeated the previous question. Why did something happen to the crown prince of the Count of Zhenbei? The commoner was so frightened that he almost forgot how to speak. He looked at Jiang Pengji's attire and knew that she was not an ordinary person. He could not help but secretly curse his bad luck. It was not easy to serve a noble person. If he accidentally angered her, it would be difficult to keep his head. With such a perturbed feeling, the commoner smiled at Jiang Pengji uneasily. His smile was very forced. After a long time, he squeezed out a sentence. This matter spread around last night. It said that the crown prince of the Count of Zhenbei fought with someone for the title of courtesan. There was a conflict and a few people were killed. The crown prince was weak and could not withstand the stimulation. He died on the belly of the courtesan. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Yuan Jing and the others in Lu Shi also recovered from Jiang Pengji's reckless jumping out of the carriage. They understood the reason for her loss of composure and their faces all turned cold. Wei Ci sighed and said, Feng Huayu's good intentions were wasted by the crown prince of the Count of Zhenbei. In order to control the situation, Feng Ji knew that the people from the northern borderline wanted to find trouble with the crown prince of the Count of Zhenbei. Instead, he confronted them. Not only was he beaten up, but his right arm was also injured. He did not have the chance to participate in the assessment that was about to begin and missed a great opportunity to rise rapidly. The crown prince of the residence of the northern marquis was unaware of the danger. Instead of obediently going to bed at night, he ran off to compete with others for the title of top beauty. Beside him, Lu Zhang glanced at Wei Ci, who was in the same carriage. There was a puzzled look in his eyes. He said strangely, From what Zixiao said, you're blaming the crown prince of the Count of Zhenbei for this matter. Could it be that there's nothing fishy about the northern borderline? Wei Ci smiled and said, You may not know this, But this crown prince of the Count of Zhenbei was originally the son of a concubine and was not favored. However, the bloodline of the Count of Zhenbei was declining. Most of the young men died on the battlefield, and the crown prince who had been established before died at a young age, not even leaving behind an heir. As a result, the position of the crown prince of the residence of Northern Marquis was given to the son of that concubine. It was impossible for a bastard son to be made a crown prince in an ordinary family. However, this bastard was already the only child, and the residents of Count Zhenbei had no choice. Not only that, this bastard son was congenitally deficient. He had some defects since he was born in his mother's womb, and he was prone to illness. The Count of Zhenbei regarded him as a fragile porcelain doll, and he did not even dare to speak loudly. They spoiled him to the extreme, and gradually raised him to be blindly arrogant and foppish. Perhaps there are traces of the northern borderline in this, but this crown prince is courting death. There's no doubt about that. If he was smarter, he would have known to behave himself when Feng Huaiyu helped him avoid the disaster. Why would he fight for the title of courtesan belle then? Wei Ci said with a cold expression. He did not care at all what kind of crisis the death of the crown prince would bring to Dongqing. On the other side, Jiang Pengji asked about the details in detail. The commoner did not know any of this, and he immediately put on a bitter face. Lang Jun, I'm just here to join in the fun. I heard about this from other people's idle chatter. How would I know what those big shots said and did? Even if you ask me, I can't answer. Jiang Pengji looked at the commoner and sighed in disappointment. She turned around and returned to the carriage. Lu Shi glanced at Jiang Pengji and said in a low voice, "Don't worry. When we arrive at the Feng residence, I'll send someone to inquire about it in detail. Since this matter has caused such a stir that even the commoners are talking about it, it must be quite a big deal. It shouldn't be difficult to find out." Jiang Pengji nodded, but she still looked a little absent-minded. Lu Shi and his son temporarily stayed at the Feng residence, while Master Yuanjing and his students stayed at another residence on the other side of Shangjing. The two groups of people did not go the same way. Once they entered the city, they naturally separated. Lu Shi asked about the place where Master Yuanjing and his people were staying. He politely said that he would bring his son to pay a formal visit to Master Yuanjing after the matter was settled. After all, he was his daughter's teacher in the future, and basic respect was still necessary. Master Yuanjing did not care about these customs. He said to Wei Ci, "Now that the situation is tense, Shangjing is in a state of panic. I don't know what the northern borderline bandits will do. Send County Chief Lu on my behalf so that I can be at ease." Wei Ci's expression did not change. He nodded and agreed, but he did not agree with it. As long as Lu Shi was with Lu Shi, whoever came to cause trouble would be courting death. Why would he need to escort them? They drove to the Feng residence in a low-key manner and did not encounter any accidents. Xueqi had been waiting at the door since he received news that Jiang Pengji was coming back. He saw the familiar carriage from afar and finally let out a long sigh of relief. He did not know why, but he felt that he could not let his Lang Jun out of his sight. Otherwise, she would cause trouble. However, when he went forward, the first person to get out of the carriage was an unfamiliar face. Wei Ci was speechless. Xueqi looked puzzled, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. If Wei Ci was not wearing a scholar's robe and was dressed as a man, he would have thought that he was a girl just by looking at his face. After Wei Ci got out of the carriage, Jiang Pengji followed. Xueqi could still smell the faint fragrance of wine on her. "Xiaoyu, many things happened last night for you to not go to Jishan. You did not go, and you missed a lot of good things." Xueqi looked like he had nothing left to live for. He knew that if he let his Lang Jun run around, he would definitely run into some messy things. Before he could calm down, he heard the sound of jade beads falling on a plate. It made his scalp tingle. Xiaoyu? Wei Ci's eyes fell on Xueqi. He murmured softly with some doubts. His voice, which was neither too soft nor too loud, fell into the ears of others. It was like a bunch of feathers gently tickling the sensitive earlobes. It made people have goosebumps, and they could not help but blush. Well, Xueqi blushed. Jiang Pengji was speechless. She did not expect Xueqi to have a problem with his voice. "Do you know me?" Chapter 282. I don't know you. I just feel that the name sounds very familiar. It's as if I've known you for a long time, but I can't remember where I've heard it. Xueqi gave a perfect smile and then cupped his hands in the other before his chest to Lu Shi and his son. He said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, County Chief Lu and Lang Jun have safely arrived at the Feng residence. I have not disgraced my master's orders, so I will not disturb you any longer. I am afraid that my master will be waiting anxiously, so I will take my leave first. Lu Shi tried to persuade him to stay, but Xueqi used the excuse that it was important to report and left. Xueqi asked in private, "Is that your new friend?" Zhang Pengji secretly rolled her eyes. She did not think that Xueqi saw her as a friend. It was obvious that this man called Xueqi, for some unknown reason, was very repulsed by her. It was not considered hostile, but it was not friendly either. However, as long as it did not affect her safety, and Xueqi was unwilling to spill his secrets, she could not be bothered to investigate the root cause. We just met once. He was ordered by Master Yuanjing to send me and my father off. Master Yuanjing? Xueqi was surprised. Did his Lang Jun mean that he met the famous Master Yuanjing when he went to Jishan's hot spring last night? He was the idol of many young people in Dongqing, and Xueqi was no exception. Is Lang Jun Master Yuanjing's disciple? Xueqi asked with a competitive look in his eyes. Yes, Master Yuanjing's disciple. I have some secrets but... Zhang Pengji smiled and said confidently, one can only be a thief for 1,000 days. How can one guard against a thief for 1,000 days? I want to see how long he can keep the secret in his stomach. Xueqi was confused. He didn't know what his Lang Jun meant. More importantly, why did Lang Jun describe him as a thief? On the other side, Xueqi was having a headache. Meeting Zhang Pengji yesterday was already outside of his plan. He did not expect to meet Xueqi today. What was even more horrifying was that Xueqi was actually by His Majesty's side at that moment. Did the sun rise from the west? Thinking of Su Xiaoyu, whom he had met before, and recalling the face he had just seen, Xueqi felt conflicted. He felt that there was something wrong with the way he woke up. When did Her Majesty and Lu Shi have such a good relationship? When did Her Majesty know Feng Jin at such a young age? Since when was Xueqi truly willing to serve His Majesty? In fact, it was not the way he woke up that had a problem. It was the Emperor who had a problem. Once he thought of her expression, mannerisms, and battle prowess that she was all too familiar with, Xueqi silently suppressed this absurd thought. Xueqi did not expect that the matter that gave him a headache was not over yet. As soon as he returned to the residence where the students of Langyi Academy were staying, he acutely noticed that the surrounding atmosphere was slightly stagnant. Looking around, not only did the students look unhappy, even Master Yuanjing, who was always optimistic, looked cold. This scene made Xueqi's heart tremble. He had a faint, ominous premonition. Master, I have sent County Chief Lu and his sons safely to the Feng mansion. Yes, I understand. Mr. Yuanjing seemed to have aged a little. His lips, which were usually curled, were now pressed into a straight line. His eyes were filled with frost. Master, did you encounter something difficult? Why do you look so distressed? Xueqi asked. Master Yuanjing restrained his expression, but the melancholy between his eyebrows was still eye-catching. I'm fine. You can go and review your lessons. Don't go out easily these few days. After saying that, he stood up with the support of the table beside him. His footsteps were faintly frivolous, which made Xueqi very worried. After Master Yuanjing left, the suffocating silence in the room was finally broken. Xueqi looked at Zuda. Zuda, you have always been taking care of Master. Do you know why Master is like this? Ever since Zuda entered Langyi Academy, he had volunteered to take care of the older Master Yuanjing. Although this person was a little simple-minded and held a different philosophy from Xueqi, Zuda was extremely respectful to Master Yuan. He followed him all the time and almost never left his side. Zuda saw that his classmates in the room were all looking at him. Suddenly, the pressure doubled. He could only bite the bullet and say, "This matter. Master strictly forbade me to say it." Xueqi's expression turned cold. He flicked his sleeves and stood up. Since Zuda did not want to say it, he would find out from other sources. Most of the other students had the same reaction. Looking at the empty hall, Zuda could not help but grit his teeth in anger and vent his anger by pounding the ground. Damn the northern borderline. 2 flowers bloomed, one on each side. Jiang Pengji looked at Feng Jin, whose arm was tied up. His movement of raising his right hand was very stiff. He looked a little silly. Who asked you to play the hero? You knew that you couldn't beat him. Why didn't you call for my help earlier? Feng Jin smiled bitterly. His face was still a little pale, but it was much better than the night before. How can a man let a woman stand up for him? Jiang Pengji was secretly surprised. She said leisurely, "Tsk, if that's the case, why did you let the servant call for me last night?" Feng Jin blinked his eyes. He did not care about his pride anymore. He supported his chin with one hand and looked at the stalemate on the chessboard. Because I suddenly realized that Lanting cannot be judged by ordinary women. All the men in the world are inferior to her. It is not embarrassing to ask for help. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Looking at the chessboard, Feng Jin thought for a long time before putting down a chess piece. He said, "I thought that I would be able to avoid the disaster by helping the heir. I didn't expect that. My good intentions would go to waste. He wouldn't have died if he didn't ask for it. This person is purely asking for it. I've just sent someone to inquire about the situation, and I've finally figured out what happened last night." Jiang Pengji's expression was cold. She was thinking about the chessboard in her mind, but she said, "That heir is really spoiled. His family doesn't give him the moon if he wants the stars. When has he ever suffered a setback outside?" He knew that the people who competed with him for the title of courtesan belle were from the northern borderline, but he did not back down after being reminded. Instead, he was fearless and even provoked them on purpose. He ordered his servants to beat them up. In the end, the heir of the Count of Zhenbei won the beauty. He won a great victory. Several people who competed with him for the title of courtesan belle were beaten to death. Beating people to death was a small matter. Among those who were beaten to death, one of them had a high status in the northern borderline. That was a headache. Now the northern borderline was unwilling to let go of this matter. They wanted an explanation from Dongqing. According to Feng Jin's experience, the emperor was now biased towards the northern borderline. As long as it did not endanger his throne, they could consider any conditions. At that moment, Lu Shi brought back terrible news. They had found a scapegoat. Coincidentally, it was someone Jiang Pengji knew, which was beyond everyone's expectation. It turned out to be Han Yu, one of Master Yuanjing's disciples. How did Han Yu get involved in this matter? Although Jiang Pengji was smart, she still could not figure it out. It had nothing to do with Han Yu. Even if they wanted to find a scapegoat, they couldn't just randomly find one. Chapter 283. Han Yu was really unlucky. Yesterday, he managed to persuade Cheng Jing to go to Jishan's hot spring with him, but they didn't know which hot spring Yuanjing and the others went to. They had no choice but to send someone to ask, so they wasted a lot of time and happened to run into the prince of the Count of Zhenbei. In terms of blood relations, Han Yu was not related to the prince of the Count of Zhenbei. But if they were to be calculative, the two of them were still related. The prince of the Count of Zhenbei was the son of a concubine, so his status was slightly higher when he was invited to be the prince, so he was raised by his legal mother. Unfortunately, the legal mother was Han Yu's father's sister, so she was Han Yu's aunt. He knew that his aunt didn't like the son of a concubine, but she had to be nice to him for the sake of the Count of Zhenbei. Han Yu thought about his aunt and was aware of the current situation in Dongqing. He was afraid that something bad would happen to him, so he tried to persuade him. The prince of the Count of Zhenbei was arrogant and spoiled, but he still knew how to be respectful to Han Yu. However, it was useless to be respectful. Although he said that he wouldn't do anything stupid, his body still went to the brothel. Cheng Jing snorted at that place and didn't go. Han Yu felt a little uneasy, but he couldn't stop the prince, so he followed him. He hoped that nothing bad would happen with him watching. Coincidentally, the courtesan queen was selling her virginity at a high price. The courtesan queen was so beautiful that the prince of the Count of Zhenbei was attracted to her. He wanted to buy her virginity at a high price, but unfortunately, he ran into the spoiled nobles of the northern borderline, so the two sides got into a fight. The prince of the Count of Zhenbei killed someone in the chaos because he had the advantage in numbers. Han Yu tried to stop him, but he was accidentally injured. It didn't matter if he was accidentally injured or not. What mattered was that the prince of the Count of Zhenbei died in the belly of the courtesan queen, but the northern borderline didn't want to let it go. They insisted that it had something to do with Han Yu and dragged him into the mess, hoping that Dongqing would hand over Han Yu and give them an explanation. Zhang Pengji suddenly asked after listening to Lu Shi's story. Father, did anyone expose Han Yu's identity last night? For example, did they say that he was Master Yuanjing's disciple? Feng Jin listened carefully at the side. He was deep in thought. When Zhang Pengji asked, he suddenly understood. Lanting, do you mean that the northern borderline is targeting Master Yuanjing by holding on to Han Yu? Zhang Pengji nodded and said with certainty, the crown prince of the Count of Zhenbei died suddenly in such a manner. He died a dishonorable death. The northern borderline should be very satisfied. But they didn't stop. Instead, they pushed Han Yu to the teeth of the storm and made things difficult for him. Of course they have other plans. Han Yu was not a sensitive person like the prince of the Count of Zhenbei. Why would the northern borderline target him for no reason? Zhang Pengji's conjecture made sense. Lu Shi remembered something after being reminded by her. Mr. Yuanjing had a war of words with the barbarians of the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. He argued for what was right and took back the 3 cities. The peace envoy sent by the northern borderline was called Wu Lisir. He was one of the few barbarians who liked to read. It was just that this person was obstinate and self-opinionated. He had no respect for anyone. After reading a few classics and historical collections, he felt that he was well versed in the culture of the Central Plains. He was the one who suggested that the royal court of the northern borderline negotiate with Dongqing. He offered 3 more cities, surrender, and annual tribute coins. He was not good at learning and was blindly arrogant. He gambled with Mr. Yuanjing and lost the 3 cities. He was so angry that he died. When Zhang Pengji heard the name Wu Lisir, she suddenly thought of the barbarian general Wu Liba whom she had met before. Lu Shi seemed to see the doubt in her eyes. He suddenly smiled. Wu Lisir is Wu Liba's uncle. Their tribe is called the Wise, in the northern borderline. They serve the royal court as strategists or generals. In the northern borderline, people eat raw meat and drink blood. They are backward and barbaric. They also advocate looting. Few people have brains. When Dongqing was founded, they didn't take them seriously. But the recent 2 generations of the royal family of the northern borderline are quite courageous. They gradually realize the importance of brains, so they focus on promoting the wise. I guess they still bear a grudge against Wu Lisir's death. Lu Shi had always looked down on the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. He also didn't think that they could rule the Central Plains because the ratio of muscles in their brains was too high. A tribe that only knew how to destroy civilization but didn't know how to preserve, create, or continue civilization was destined to be inferior. Feng Jin listened carefully. His eyebrows were tightly knitted. So, the northern borderline wants to make things difficult for Mr. Yuanjing? Lu Shi said, they probably want to show off. Wu Lisir was known as the wisest person in the northern borderline. There were even rumors that he was the reincarnation of Civil Star. He enjoyed a very high reputation in the northern borderline. If he wasn't so confident and determined that he would win, why would he be willing to bet the 3 cities with Mr. Yuanjing? In the end, Wu Lisir almost couldn't fight back. The northern borderline's face was swollen. It was a small matter that his face was swollen. Wu Lisir was so angry that he vomited blood on the spot. After he went back, he was depressed and died of anger within a few days. Mr. Yuanjing trampled on the faces of the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. He was able to live peacefully in Langyi. It was a skill. Feng Jin said worriedly. So, Han Yu and Mr. Yuanjing, won't they be in danger? The northern borderline obviously wanted to take this opportunity to get back at them. Even if they didn't kill Mr. Yuanjing, they would kill Han Yu or kill both of them to ruin their reputation. For scholars, reputation and dignity were far more important than their own lives. Not to mention Mr. Yuanjing, who was a famous teacher in the 9 prefectures. Compared to Feng Jin's worries, Zhang Pengji looked calm. She seemed to be enjoying a good show. She said, Huayu, do you think Mr. Yuanjing will be troubled by such a small thing? He has been famous for many years. Although she had only met Mr. Yuanjing a few times and he seemed to be just an ordinary middle-aged man with profound knowledge and a kind personality, Jiang Pengji had always been a good judge of character. Although Mr. Yuanjing's appearance was getting old, his eyes were still young and full of vitality. Feng Jin was speechless. Jiang Pengji said with certainty, "I believe that Mr. will solve this problem beautifully. In less than 3 days." Why 3 days? Because the evaluation would start in 3 days, and Han Yu would also have to participate. Unless Feng Jin was so unlucky that he hurt his hand and couldn't write, Mr. Yuanjing would never let his beloved disciple miss such an important life event. If he couldn't even do this, it would be a waste of the high praise and affirmation of the people in the world. Jiang Pengji also felt that there was no need for her to study under such a teacher. Chapter 284. Master Yuanjing looked at the koi fish swimming in the pond in the courtyard and said with a gentle expression, "It's good that you're back." Han Yu was fine, but he was a little nervous. "I'm an unfilial disciple. I got you involved in this and almost ruined your reputation." Seeing Han Yu kneeling on the ground, Master Yuanjing laughed. "Get up. You've never been so obedient before." Han Yu was anxious. He didn't know what his master would give him in exchange for his safety from the northern borderline. It would be terrible if this incident was exaggerated and people said that Master Yuanjing secretly colluded with the northern borderline. "It's okay. The letter I wrote will not be used against you. Why are you being so careful?" Han Yu was relieved to hear that. Master Yuanjing waved at him and said, "Come closer to me." Han Yu did as he was told and moved closer. Master Yuanjing raised his right hand and pinched Han Yu's face. It hurt a little. After a long time, Master Yuanjing showed a complicated expression. Han Yu didn't know whether it was joy or worry. "You may leave. If there's nothing else, call Zixiao over." Master Yuanjing let go of his hand and turned to feed the koi fish in the pond without looking at Han Yu. Han Yu had never seen Master Yuanjing like this. He was anxious, but he still went to call Wei Ci. "You're different." He didn't expect Wei Ci to say that as soon as they met. "What's different?" Han Yu felt creeped out by Wei Ci's stare. "Nothing." Wei Ci lowered his eyes and frowned. "Since my master asked me to go, I shouldn't keep him waiting." Wei Ci sighed in his heart and left the confused Han Yu. The dark clouds in his heart gradually dispersed. Han Yu was puzzled. Why are they all so strange? The world is so big and full of strange things. The same person can change so much in just a few days. I feel like I've lived for decades in vain. Master Yuanjing noticed Wei Ci as soon as he approached. He said with emotion, "Zixiao, do you think this disaster is a blessing or a curse?" Wei Ci said, "For Dongqing, it's a disaster, not a blessing. For Wenbin, it's a blessing, not a curse." The accidental death of the Crown Prince of Zhanbei Marquis was completely out of Wei Ci's expectations. He did not need to think to know that after this fuse was lit, Dongqing's situation in the next few years would be very grim. The pace of the chaotic world coming was much earlier than he remembered. Fortune and misfortune go hand in hand. Dongqing was unlucky, but Han Yu was lucky. Wei Ci had left Dongqing a long time ago, but he had kept in touch with his classmates through letters, so he more or less knew what had happened to them. Han Yu bore the misfortune of having his entire family wiped out. Based on his physiognomy alone, he was lacking in fortune. The inner courtyard had a calamity of love, and the palace of husband and wife was in decline. Because of the calamity of women, he was destined to die prematurely in his prime. In fact, it was true. When Han Yu was middle-aged, his wife's family rebelled against him and was quelled. After the incident was exposed, he wrote a confession letter and committed suicide by swallowing gold. Wei Ci had learned from Master Yuanjing and was quite accomplished in reading people's faces. Naturally, he could see the changes in Han Yu's facial features. Master Yuanjing smiled and said, "From the looks of it, Lu Shi is indeed the destined one." Wei Ci said in a soft but firm voice, "She is." Master Yuanjing was gratified at first, but then he showed a complicated expression. "She is still an unpolished jade. Although Lu Zhongqing has been guiding her, the effect is minimal. She is cruel and ruthless. If she doesn't change, I'm afraid she can't be a wise ruler." Wei Ci was silent. Could he say that Her Majesty had restrained herself a lot? She was not a wise ruler. She was not even close to being a wise ruler. The history books were mixed. Some people praised her for being open-minded, while others slandered her for being tyrannical. The former was debatable, while the latter was notorious. Master Yuanjing tilted his head and seemed to be thinking. For a man in his 40s or 50s, this action was suspected of maliciously acting cute, but it complimented the person who was unusually young and energetic. Wei Ci said softly, "She is an unpolished jade, not a stubborn stone. No matter how much a stubborn stone is polished, it is still a stubborn stone. But an unpolished jade is different." He didn't know what had changed, but he could see the changes in Jiang Pengji. Master Yuanjing smiled kindly after hearing that. He raised his hand and knocked on Wei Ci's head. "You don't mean what you say." Wei Ci lowered his head and looked embarrassed. The news that Han Yu was out of danger had spread throughout Shangjing. Those who paid close attention to the matter had received the news. "I wonder what Master Yuanjing wrote that made the northern borderline give in so easily." Feng Jin, the wounded man, had a comfortable life. Although he was a little depressed that he couldn't participate in the assessment, he quickly adjusted his mentality. While others were still writing furiously and reading through the night, he was drinking wine and fighting with Jiang Pengji on the chessboard. Jiang Pengji pouted and said, "The people in the northern borderline have muscles in their brains. Master Yuanjing's content must have hit the nail on the head to make such a boorish man bow down. The kind that slaps people in the face and they don't dare to make a sound." Jiang Pengji's judgment was almost always correct, even about Master Yuanjing. Feng Jin was curious and said, "Then guess, what did he write?" "Guess? I guess there are 3 possibilities. First, it's a strategy to attack the city and subdue the enemy. It's a vital part of the hinterland of the northern borderline. But no matter how wonderful the strategy is, it needs to be executed by the military force. If Master Yuanjing presents a strategy to subdue the enemy in the northern borderline, it's mainly a deterrent. It's a silent message. Did you see that? Such a strategy can kill you. If Dongqing can't handle it, I can rely on a country that can kill you." Feng Jin was amused by Jiang Pengji's vivid simulation. He almost choked on his breath. Jiang Pengji mumbled, "Second, maybe it's a secret of the northern borderline?" Feng Jin finally stopped smiling and asked her, "What about the third?" He knew Jiang Pengji was talking nonsense, but she had a serious expression on her face. That was why he was amused. "Third, I read a piece of history at home. The 3 tribes of the northern borderline are the descendants of the Qianggu tribe of the previous dynasty. They are brave and good at fighting. Each of them is fierce and ferocious. During the chaos of the 16 kingdoms, they burned, killed, and looted. They raped women and used women as food to satisfy their hunger. They even kept young girls in captivity to reproduce. In just a few decades, their population expanded from less than 200,000 to more than 3 million. Feng Jin listened carefully. He knew about this piece of history, but it had nothing to do with the topic, right? Jiang Pengji took a sip of tea to moisten her lips. She continued, "The Qianggu tribe has a large number of elite rattan armored cavalry. The rattan armor is made with a special method by the Qianggu tribe. It's lighter and more portable than normal armor. It's hard for swords and spears to penetrate it. The rattan armored cavalry is very difficult to deal with. They became their weapon in the northern borderline. In the end, they even wanted to use the power of the rattan armored cavalry to conquer the Central Plains. They wanted to dominate the Central Plains. In a short period of time, no one could stop them." Feng Jin thought about it and said, "I've heard of the rattan armored cavalry. In the end, 500,000 rattan armored cavalry were buried in Sichuan Plain. 500,000 was a bit exaggerated, but it was certainly not a small number. That was the history of the end of the 16 Kingdoms chaotic era. 500,000 rattan armored cavalrymen swept through half of the Central Plains. In the end, the prime minister of the Great Xia dynasty, Huangfu Fengmin, set fire to the Sichuan Plains. No one survived." Jiang Pengji suddenly smiled. "If I were Master Yuanjing, I wouldn't say anything else. I'll just say one thing. Do you remember the fire in Sichuan Plain that destroyed our ancestors' wild hopes of conquering the Central Plains?" Feng Jin was stunned for a while. He said, "Did the 3 tribes of the northern borderline rebuild the rattan armored cavalry?" Feng Jin thought about how scary the rattan armored cavalry was in the history books. He felt like his scalp was going to explode. Although the northern borderline was not a good place, It was rich in high-quality horses. It was not difficult to build a surprise army. Dongqing's terrain was flat. If the Rattan armored cavalry broke through the northern borderline's defense line and entered the hinterland of Dongqing, it would be impossible to stop them. Jiang Pengji shook her head. She recalled the warriors of the northern borderline. Their armor was strange. She could not figure out what the problem was. She went back and flipped through the books that Cheng Cheng had collected. When she saw the history of Sichuan Plain, she remembered. Jiang Pengji said, "The Rattan armored cavalry's weakness is too obvious. The Qiangu tribe fell because of it. How could the 3 tribes of the northern borderline be so stupid?" In fact, according to Jiang Pengji's observation that night, the Rattan armor that the 3 tribes of the northern borderline created did not seem to be very afraid of fire. If Master Yuanjing did that, it would at most be a warning to them. "You're too young to play games with me." Feng Jin was speechless. Chapter 285. Feng Jin had always thought of himself as the son of an aristocratic family with a good upbringing. He would not do anything rude under normal circumstances. Until he met Jiang Pengji. He coughed until his cheeks turned red. He awkwardly tidied up the messy crime scene in front of him. He looked a little embarrassed. "Lanting, Master Yuanjing is the respected headmaster of the world. How can you?" At this point, Feng Jin really couldn't say anything. He realized that he couldn't find the right words in his mind. Jiang Pengji pouted and said, "It's just a joke. I'm just saying it in a different way. I'm not trying to slander him. Why are you being so old-fashioned? Maybe if I said this to Master Yuanjing, he would agree with me." Feng Jin sighed. When it came to reasoning, he really couldn't win against the person in front of him. Master Yuanjing is broad-minded. "He will not argue with a junior like you," Feng Jin said. Because of the severe injury on his hand, he would not be able to write for a while. Unfortunately, he missed the opportunity to participate in the assessment. Therefore, he had been very free recently. Jiang Pengji would ask him to play chess or chat to kill time. She did not want him to think too much. No matter if one was from a poor family or a gentry family, everyone studied hard for many years to rise to the top. Feng Jin did not show it on his face, but he was definitely not that carefree. Feng Jin knew Jiang Pengji's good intentions. "What are you doing?" After a game, Jiang Pengji asked Takshu to prepare a table in the courtyard. A big stack of bamboo paper lay on it. "Writing from memory. I have nothing to do anyway. Your mind is not on the board when I play chess with you. It's boring." Jiang Pengji knelt on a bamboo chair. Takshu lifted her sleeves slightly and helped her grind the ink. Feng Jin felt a little awkward when Jiang Pengji saw through his absent-minded state. He quickly calmed himself down and changed the topic. "Writing from memory? The task that Uncle Lu gave you?" As the general evaluation officer, Lu Shi went to the examination hall early to prepare. To avoid suspicion, he would not come back before the assessment ended. Feng Jin thought that since Lu Shi valued Jiang Pengji so much, he would definitely focus on her studies. It was normal for him to give her some homework. Jiang Pengji said, "No, I'm writing from memory Master Cheng's book collection." Mr. Cheng referred to Cheng Cheng. Previously, she had made a deal with Cheng Cheng. She provided the best bamboo paper, and Cheng Cheng would make a copy of his book collection for her. However, Cheng Cheng had collected so many books, more than tens of thousands of scrolls. It would take at least 1 or 2 years for him to finish copying. It wasn't that Jiang Pengji couldn't wait that long, but she was free now and could do things better. The more she immersed herself in this era, the more Jiang Pengji saw and understood. It was true that there were too many things in the ancient era that made her unhappy, such as the backward technology, the widespread illiteracy, the barbaric customs, the sexism. But it could not be denied that this era also had its brilliant aspects, such as the accumulated wisdom of the predecessors. She flipped through many books on the art of war and found that many of the concepts in them were very similar to what she had learned. Some seemed superficial, but the essence was very similar. It should be known that her previous era and this ancient era were separated by at least 10 to 20,000 years. Jiang Pengji slowly withdrew the contempt in her heart and changed her attitude. She studied and studied seriously. If not, she wouldn't have spent so much effort to get Cheng Cheng's book collection. At the beginning of man, his nature is good. His nature is similar, but his habits are different. If he does not teach, his nature will change. Feng Jin sat at the side and watched her write these sentences. He thought about it carefully, but there seemed to be no familiar memory. However, the sentences were short and concise, and there was a profound truth hidden in them. His eyes lit up and he asked, "Who wrote this?" "It's simple and easy to remember. It's interesting." As soon as Feng Jin asked, a bunch of bullet screens floated across the virtual screen. Lao Siji Lianming, young Feng Jin, this is the content of the three-character classic. It's an enlightening textbook in ancient China. Yinuagia Zhuge Qinma. The three-character classic was written by Wang Yinglin in the Song dynasty. Even if I told you, you wouldn't know who Wang Yinglin is. Shenglei Odidai. I checked on Baidu. The author of the three-character classic is Wang Yinglin. Nongfu Shanquan Yudiangshuan. Wang Yinglin in the Song dynasty. But young Feng Jin's dimension doesn't have a Song dynasty, right? In fact, according to the analysis of some gurus, the era that the streamer was in was similar to the Wei Jin dynasty. Apart from the answer, there were other bullet screens that said, "Not teaching is the father's fault. Not teaching is the teacher's laziness." The content was messy and varied. If Zhang Pengji didn't have a strong memory, she would have been confused. Facing Feng Jin's question, Zhang Pengji looked down and glanced at the bullet screen when he wasn't paying attention. She continued writing. "I don't know. The characters in the book can't be studied anymore. I just thought it was interesting, so I copied it." There was something wrong with the stream that day. It was as lively as a festival. When Zhang Pengji said that she wanted to copy some enlightening books and asked if they had any suggestions, the audience in the streaming room went wild. They didn't know about ancient classics, but Baidu definitely did. They could pretend to be a great scholar in front of the streamer with just a search. So, Zhang Pengji wrote the three-character classic on the first page. On the author's side, she wrote, "Anonymous." She didn't write the original author because she didn't want people to find out who the legendary Wang Yinglin was. So, how did she know who Wang Yinglin was? Feng Jin didn't find Zhang Pengji's answer strange. Cheng Cheng's big boxes were too many. He also took a look at them from afar. The books were neatly arranged, which showed the owner's care. But many of the ancient books were incomplete, so it was impossible to find out who the author was. Mencius's mother chose a neighbor. Is this about Mencius's mother moving 3 times? Feng Jin stared at it without blinking. Many of the short and concise sentences came from the classic stories that people were familiar with. Every scholar knew about the story of Mencius's mother moving 3 times, but it was unheard of to summarize it in just 6 words. Faintly, Feng Jin felt something strange flash in his heart, but it disappeared too quickly. He didn't catch the feeling. Zhang Pengji frowned and complained, "You're disturbing me." Feng Jin frowned and stayed silent. Then he sat down obediently. "Good. It's much quieter now." Zhang Pengji continued to copy. The audience in the streaming room also helped her find all kinds of annotations. But they didn't copy and paste from the same web page, so the content was very messy. She could only delete and edit, which wasted a few pieces of bamboo paper. Some audience enthusiastically helped Zhang Pengji, but naturally, there were also audience members who were watching the show and complaining. Chapter 286. Dora A. Meng. At least the host didn't say that the three-character classic was written by her. The author's name is anonymous. Xiao Wanzi's Wanzi. In fact, I think the streamer's way of doing things is smart. After all, in ancient times, scholars despised each other. If you really want to convince the other party, you need to have excellent skills and literary self-restraint. If you rely on plagiarism alone, the possibility of exposing yourself is too high. In fact, there were quite a number of viewers who urged Zhang Pengji to write her name on the book. After all, the three-character classic was an enlightening book. If it were to be popularized in the future, almost every child would be exposed to it first. Her name would be immortalized for generations to come. However, her answer made the audience feel awkward. Host V. According to the federal law on the protection of original literature, the crime of plagiarism is very serious. The minimum sentence is 3 years, and the maximum sentence is life. Even if you're not sued by the original creator, 90% of the profits will belong to the original creator, and you'll have to pay a high amount of psychological damages. Apart from this reason, Jiang Pengji had another more important reason. Her gaze was fixed on the distant future, not the petty gains in front of her. The three-character classic given by the audience in the streaming room was very short. It did not take Jiang Pengji long to finish copying it. She asked Takshu to dry it with an incense burner. Feng Jin had nothing to do, so he sorted the dried papers according to their contents and bound them into a booklet. Compared to the books he had read before, this short, three-character classic was very shallow, but easy to understand. Sigh with the chaos of the 16 kingdoms. Who knows how many treasures have been lost and their inheritance broken? Feng Jin read the three-character classic over and over again. As smart as he was, he vaguely knew the true purpose of this book. Because of Jiang Pengji's misdirection, he had already determined that this was the only copy that had been lost during the chaotic times of the 16 kingdoms. He did not know where Cheng Cheng had found it from. It was already difficult enough to maintain a relatively complete content, so he did not dwell on the question of who the author was. Because of this, Feng Jin admired Cheng Cheng's persistence even more. In his opinion, that was the true strength of a scholar, and not the mutual deceit and intrigue of the court. Jiang Pengji listened and casually said, "They are all unique copies. Once they are destroyed or the people who know the contents are gone, the future generations will never be able to read the contents. If we can expand the scope and everyone has a copy, or if more people read it, it will be easier to pass it on. If an era wanted to progress, books could not only belong to one family or a small group of people." It just so happened that the current situation was that many precious, unique copies were in the hands of one or a few landowning households that had existed for a long time. If these landowning households met with misfortune, the unique copies might be lost or completely disappear, and the inheritance would be severed. There were many reasons for this phenomenon, but in Jiang Pengji's opinion, there were two main reasons. Firstly, the technique of papermaking had not yet matured. The bamboo slips were heavy and the paper was light. In other words, the technological productivity of society was insufficient, causing the cost of studying to be too high, and ordinary people could not afford it. If they couldn't even afford to eat, who would have extra money to study? Secondly, the monopoly of the special class on the inheritance of knowledge systems. The former was still manageable, but the latter was too difficult. If he wanted to break the current system of passing on knowledge and popularize education, it was inevitable that he would come into conflict with these aristocratic families that monopolized knowledge. Just by thinking about it, she could guess how great the pressure was. However, the road was made by people. As long as one had the heart, there was nothing in this world that was impossible. Feng Jin did not reply, but the way he looked at Jiang Pengji was different. Jiang Pengji noticed this detail, but she did not care. She continued to deal with the various annotations that gave her a headache. At that moment, she especially missed the virtual network and the powerful AI system. She had everything she wanted. Why would she need to copy it by hand? "System, are you dead?" She was multitasking. She read the bullet screen, copied the book, and typed on the system. The system snorted. "I'm already dead. If there's something, burn incense. If there's nothing, visit the grave." Jiang Pengji secretly clicked her tongue. She ignored it for a while, but the system's temper was getting worse. "Can't you copy the contents of the bullet screen? You see how hard it is for me to copy it by hand. Can you at least be considerate?" The system said coldly, "I'm sorry, host. Your streaming level is not high enough. You don't have the authority to do so. You have to be at least level 3. Jiang Pengji secretly glanced at the popularity points backstage and frowned slightly. Her accumulated popularity points had long exceeded the 1,000,000 mark. This number was just enough to upgrade a level 2 streamer to level 3, but if she did that, her popularity points would be used up. If she did that, it would undoubtedly put her in a position where she would be held back. The system had been coveting the points for a long time. It had tried to tempt her to spend them, but Jiang Pengji was not tempted. Thinking about that, she directly suppressed the idea of upgrading her level. She deliberately kept the system in suspense. After a long time she said, "Oh, then I'll just copy it by hand. I'll treat it as practicing my calligraphy." The system. Oh, was she deliberately teasing it? In order not to arouse Feng Jin's suspicion, Jiang Pengji not only copied the 3-character classic and the annotations, but also wrote down from memory a few volumes of military books that Cheng Cheng had memorized. Coincidentally, Feng Jin's family also had such a book collection, but a very important half was missing. When he saw Jiang Pengji's complete copy, he immediately loved it and carefully read the missing contents. Mr. Cheng is really a wonderful person. Feng Jin sighed from the bottom of his heart, as if he had obtained a treasure. My father loved this book. He often lamented that he could not see the whole book in his lifetime. He searched all the houses but could not collect it completely. I didn't expect that I would be able to see the whole book. Time passed quickly as Jiang Pengji copied and wrote. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the assessment. The assessment was the current selection system of Dongqing. It was similar to the 9-rank system that the audience was more familiar with, but there was a big difference between the two. The assessment was conducted every 3 years. The top 3 categories were family background, morality, and knowledge, while the bottom 3 were appearance, ability, and temperament. Family background was needless to say. It depended on one's father, mother, and ancestors. It was better to reincarnate than to learn well. Morality belonged to the category where one could cheat and get a good score by bribing the assessment officer. Knowledge, the general assessment officer would set the question and answer within a time limit. Appearance, in short, was based on the face and the way they dressed. When the time came, they would see a group of gorgeously dressed sissies. As for ability, this criterion was rather vague. Basically, it was a person writing an ability report and bragging about it. This item was linked to one's knowledge. If one bragged too much, one's knowledge would be rejected by the general evaluation officer, and there was basically no hope for one's ability. Temperament. This category was interesting. It completely depended on the general assessment officer's personal preference. If he liked you, he would give you a score. If he liked you, he would give you a score. If he disliked you, he would have a bad temperament. This was also the category where it was easiest to cheat. Looking at the above 6 categories, the general assessment officer played a very important role in it. It was different from the closed examination that the audience in the streaming room knew. The assessment was more like a large-scale royal gathering. As Lu Shi's son, Jiang Pengji naturally received an invitation. Looking at the invitation, Jiang Pengji spat out a sentence after a long time. I have never seen such a childish assessment. Chapter 287. Jiang Pengji, General of the Federation, female, former commander of the 7th Corps. Why was there a prefix of former? Because she had died in battle. However, the person who clearly remembered that she had died in battle had now opened her eyes. Don't let go of me. Go away, bastard. Help! The sound of crying filled her ears, causing her to have a splitting headache. She tried to open her eyes, but found that her vision was dark. She could faintly see figures moving in front of her, and there were also innumerable tragic cries, the sound of clothes being torn, and the sound of evil laughter mixed in. She felt that a long time had passed, but in fact, it was only a moment. When a malicious and unfamiliar aura approached, her body had already reacted subconsciously. Ouch! Jiang Pengji had already rolled over and stood up. She formed a claw with her right hand and broke the arm of a strange man. At that moment, she looked around coldly and found herself in a dark and dilapidated woodshed. The surrounding air was dry and suffocating, filled with all kinds of pungent smells. Thick dust floated in the air, which made her sensitive sense of smell suffer. Boss, this bitch. It was a strange language, but the emotions in the words revealed malice and hostility. Hearing this voice, she subconsciously frowned and raised her foot to step on the person whose arm she had broken. She stepped on his face to the ground and twisted it so hard that his whole face was covered with reddish-purple color. Jiang Pengji's eyes darkened. She exerted force on her foot, and with a soft sound, white brain matter mixed with blood burst out from the broken skull. The person was dead as a doornail. The movement in the corner startled the people who had lost their minds. Jiang Pengji looked at them coldly, and anger brewed in her chest. What did she hate the most? One was betrayal, and the other was treachery. Although she didn't know why she, who had died in battle, had woken up, the scene in front of her clearly told her that a group of beasts was bullying and humiliating more than 10 innocent and young girls. Some of them were even lying lifelessly on the ground. Animals! Damn it! When the 2 half-naked men saw this, they spat on the ground and stared at her with evil eyes. It was as if they wanted to see through the layers of clothes on her body and see the undeveloped body. However, when they saw the head that was crushed by her foot, all their charming feelings flew away. Bang bang bang. Jiang Pengji had always believed in the principle of using one's fist rather than one's mouth. The men in the room had obviously been branded as prisoners on death row by her. It was obvious that she had nothing to say to a few dead people. Her figure flashed, and her fist directly hit the vital point of one of the men's lower abdomen. The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Jiang Pengji's current strength was less than 1% of her peak, but it was no problem for her to deal with these small fries. Some of them tried to use the unfamiliar girls as shields, but she took advantage of the gap. She grabbed their hairbun and smashed their heads to the ground. Their heads were split open and they died. The thick blood soon filled the small and dim room. Woo-woo. After crushing the last person's neck, Jiang Pengji's cold expression loosened for a moment. She looked at the girls who were disheveled and had disheveled skin. Perhaps they were frightened. They huddled in a corner with tears on their faces. It was a very strange scene. She didn't even know what had happened to her. "Who are you?" she asked, but when the girls heard her, it was a strange pronunciation. They couldn't understand her at all. "They've been killed. You're safe." Jiang Pengji didn't like to talk much. Only her subordinates took the initiative to smile at her. She rarely took the initiative to communicate with others. After all, her mouth would offend people whenever she opened it. She could overturn people with a glance. Over time, she had offended many people, so she was too lazy to speak. Seeing the horror in the girls' eyes, as if they had seen a ghost, Jiang Pengji was silent. It seemed like there was a language barrier. She tried to switch to a few interstellar languages that she was familiar with and spoke them one by one. Not only did the negative emotions in the girls' eyes not calm, but they became more intense. Well, communication failed. Jiang Pengji shrugged helplessly. Her head hurt. Just when she didn't know what to do, there was a noise outside the house. Then, the door was kicked open. The accomplices of those bastards? Although this body wasn't her own, its quality was still affected. Her night vision was barely passable. The people who kicked open the door were a group of shirtless men who reeked of alcohol. They were dressed very strangely, and they spoke in a strange language. But it didn't matter. Even if Jiang Pengji couldn't understand them, she could distinguish the emotions conveyed in their words. They were all vile, malicious, and full of hostility and murderous intent. Before the bandits could react, Jiang Pengji had already stepped forward to harvest their heads without saying anything. Although her current body was very weak, she had the aura of a person who could hold the pass against 10,000 enemies. Almost every time she attacked, she could kill someone. Soon, the inside and outside of the house were filled with corpses, and each of the corpses had died a rather gruesome death. Turning around to look at the frightened girls, Jiang Pengji frowned, but she couldn't leave them alone. "You're safe. I won't let them hurt you." She squatted down and looked at the girls who were curled up. She tried to convey her kindness, but it didn't work. Unless it was something special, Jiang Pengji's patience had always been lacking. She could completely feel the girls' fearful gazes as if they were looking at a monster and their feelings of rejection. She was suddenly furious, but she could not vent her anger on a group of weaklings. She and those men seemed to be the source of the girls' fear. They kept wandering in front of them and couldn't communicate at all. "Forget it. Let them calm down," Jiang Pengji murmured. She got up and left the small wooden house under the gaze of the noble girls. She didn't go far. She just cleaned up the rest of the bandits' village and then found a tree nearby to lie down and keep watch for them. After dealing with the panic, Jiang Pengji had time to think about the strange things that happened to her. First of all, this body wasn't hers. It was too weak. It was a compliment. If it had been her in the past, she could have easily penetrated the opponent's front and back with one punch, not just shattering the opponent's internal organs. Secondly, this body was still very short. Maybe it was a dwarf. Why did she make such a judgment? Because she found that her sight was too low. She estimated that it was less than 1.5 meters above sea level. Until midnight, the girls in the house seemed to calm down. Jiang Pengji planned to communicate with them again, but the girls screamed in fear when they saw her. Some even threw things at her. Although she wasn't hurt, it still annoyed Jiang Pengji. "I can't communicate at all." Jiang Pengji dodged the debris and returned to the tree where she had been hiding. She kept her eyes open and watched the night. Although the girls were hostile to her, most of them were frightened. They were probably frightened. She was the leader of the army. She would not be calculative with the weak. After one night, the next dawn came. When the sun was high in the sky, some strange figures appeared at the foot of the mountain in the distance. Those people seemed to be looking for the girls. Jiang Pengji looked at them from afar and then jumped into the forest. She wanted to find out what the hell this place was. Chapter 288. It was already late autumn, and the world was already playing the prelude to winter. Everything was covered in gold, and the air was filled with a sense of depression. However, the desolation of autumn did not affect the desire of the people in Shangjing to watch the fun. The wide road had been cleared, and both sides were guarded by armed officers and soldiers. They blocked the people who wanted to see the young Langjuns. When the auspicious hour arrived, more than 100 carriages with red silk hung on them slowly drove to the royal garden. The pedestrians on both sides were craning their necks. Hey, that Lang Jun is so good-looking, like a fairy. I wonder which family he is from. I don't care which family he is from. We are just ordinary people. This is the only time we can see him. More than 100 red silk carriages set off from the auspicious hour and paraded along the main street of Shangjing. The curtain of the carriage was lifted, revealing the Langjuns sitting inside. Each of them had red lips and white teeth. Their clothes were bright and beautiful, and their appearance was not bad. Occasionally, their eyes would wander and fall on the unmarried women. It was as if their souls could be sucked away. Even though there was a huge disparity in status, many unmarried women would dress up beautifully today. They wanted to talk but were too shy to flirt with the young Langjuns in the carriage, hoping to make a good relationship. Jiang Pengji sat in a private room by the window in a tea house. She could see the lively scene on the street if she turned her head slightly. It's like a courtesan parade. It hurts my eyes. She took a sip of tea, glanced at the carriages with red silk that happened to pass by, and silently looked away. The audience in the streaming room had the same idea as her. When they heard that there was a parade before the evaluation and that they could see the high-quality young men who would participate in the evaluation, they all clamored and moved their stools over. They craned their necks and waited for the parade to begin. However, when the first carriage passed by, they all covered their eyes and whined that they were going blind. Ru fu ru zi wa yongji. I am here to see handsome men, not to have my eyeballs removed. Host, you are so unkind. Lao Siji Lianming. If the host did not say that this is a serious activity, I would have thought it was a courtesan parade. Chow Lao Ai Ru wife. No, upstairs, which courtesan is so good-looking? Aren't they afraid of going bankrupt? Mai Shi Zhao Zilong. #smirk. Even Chow Lao, who has a strong taste, can't accept this. Jiang Pengji originally wanted to complain, but when she saw the complaints in the streaming room, she almost choked on the tea she was drinking. Although it was a little embarrassing, at least it was not too embarrassing. Feng Jin, who was sitting opposite her, was more miserable. He almost spilled the tea on his brand-new clothes. If he had not swallowed the tea, he would have choked and spat it out. Lanting, you are really... I'm just telling the truth. They are much more ostentatious than the courtesan parading through the streets. Jiang Pengji said with a smile. Her eyes were like a pair of crescent moons. I thought it was a pity that you missed the assessment because of your hand injury. But when I think of you sitting in a red silk carriage like them, dressed gorgeously, wearing pink, red and green clothes, I can't bear to look straight at you. The weather had completely turned cold, but that did not stop the people's passion for dressing up. Their clothes were mostly bright colors like lotus root pink, water green, lake green, dark blue, spring green, willow yellow, and scarlet. The lapels of their clothes were slightly loose, revealing some of their collarbones. Their hair was tied up with a jade crown and decorated with delicate silk flowers or blooming red plum branches. Their faces were covered with a thick layer of snow-white powder that was as white as a limestone wall. Their lips were mostly painted with bright red lipstick, giving people goosebumps all over their bodies. She could not understand the aesthetics of the people in ancient times. The people who were ugly to her were as beautiful as fairies in the eyes of the people downstairs. Jiang Pengji took a deep breath. She had to admit that the Langjuns were indeed very good-looking. But their makeup skills were too destructive. Jiang Pengji could not help but wonder if the poor kids had offended the stylist. Bah, where did the stylist come from in this era? Feng Jin looked at Jiang Pengji helplessly. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. This is the fashion in Shangjing. The gentry's sons are after it. It doesn't matter if it's 100 people or 1,000,000 people. Ugly is ugly. The so-called beauty does not mean putting all the good things on your head. If that's the case, it's better to look at a vase. Jiang Pengji pouted, which made Feng Jin speechless. Feng Jin coughed and said, "Lanting is still young. You will understand when you grow up." Jiang Pengji glanced at Feng Jin, which made him feel uncomfortable. "If you think that's beautiful, why don't I see you wearing makeup?" Jiang Pengji looked at him from head to toe. He was wearing a green scholar's robe with layers and wide sleeves. His black hair was tied up neatly with a simple and natural crown. He looked refreshing. Feng Jin's fingers paused. He shook his head and suddenly said, "I'm born beautiful. I don't need any accessories." Jiang Pengji was speechless. Young Feng Jin, even if you're narcissistic, you're still so elegant and refined. Jiang Pengji was bored to death. She supported the window with one hand. The red silk carriages passed by the tea house one after another. The people seemed to have turned into star chasers. They stared at the Langjuns. Many girls even took off the sachets on their waists and threw them at the carriages when they saw the men they liked. Perhaps they were used to it, but many viewers in the streaming room seemed to be able to accept it. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Suddenly, there was a Mimi who felt sorry for the audience's aesthetics. Had it been destroyed? Just as she was about to doze off, the bullet screen in the streaming room suddenly surged out like a blowout. It almost covered every inch of the virtual screen. Jiang Pengji frowned. She didn't understand what these people who were obsessed with looks had taken the wrong medicine this time. Xueqi, I saw my husband. He's so handsome. Yusubi Sangwashan, I feel like my eyes are healed. It's great greater than over equal to V. Oh, Lao Ciji Lianming. I heard the sound of flowers blooming. Zhang Qingyai Jishui. Mama asked me why the screen of my phone is wet. I haven't licked it enough. Sans Hisong Shu Ningshi. It's blown out. The ascetic Adonis seems to have torn his clothes. She turned her head to look downstairs. She heard Feng Jin's laughter. This Lang Jun looks unfamiliar. Which family are you from? The man was wearing a dark blue robe with wide sleeves. The dark color did not make him look old. Instead, it made his snow-white skin look even more beautiful. His face was like jade, his hair was like splashes of ink, his lips were red without lipstick, and his eyebrows were green without any makeup. Unlike other people who looked at the people and smiled, he was sitting still. He closed his eyes and seemed to be deep in thought. His eyebrows were slightly furrowed. With her excellent eyesight, Jiang Pengji could even see his slender eyelashes. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.